Chapter 25. The Beastkin siblings were just an interlude and Yun Ruoyan quickly forgot about them. She led Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen deeper into the imperial territory. Sister Ruoyan, look. There's so much core foundation grass. You can make a lot of core foundation pills. Lin Qingxue pointed excitedly at the grass as they turned a corner and saw a large patch of emerald green plants growing about 10 meters in front of them. Core foundation grass was the most important ingredient in making core foundation pills. Although core foundation pills weren't as effective as core foundation pills, because they were relatively easy to make, they were the most useful and common. For example, for this trial, almost all of the scions of the major families would carry their own herbs with them, and core foundation pills were a necessity. Because of this trial, core foundation pills were in high demand throughout the Li Kingdom. Pick some more, grandfather will be very happy to see them. Yes, thank goodness I have a storage pouch, or I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to store so much. Lin Qingchen patted her pouch. The pouch that Lin Zainan had given her could store more than 10 times what it looked like, but it still couldn't compare to Yun Ruoyan's bracelet. Mistress, Qiuqiu's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. What's the matter? You can also store some core foundation grass in your storage pouch. Perhaps it'll be useful in the future. Yun Ruoyan had only been paying attention to her surroundings and hadn't really thought about this. When she was young, she had been tested to have a talent for pill making, but because she had been poisoned, she had gradually lost that talent. Now that she was attempting to cure the poison with her grandfather's help, perhaps her talent could be restored, and she could become a pill master like her grandfather. She already had a high-grade furnace in her bracelet, and if she prepared a few more herbs, she could attempt to make pills herself. All right, let's make use of this trial to prepare some good herbs. While Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen weren't paying attention, Yun Ruoyan picked some core foundation grass and placed it in her bracelet. Shoo! Lin Qingxue suddenly made a shushing gesture. There's a white rabbit over there. Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen looked in the direction of her finger. At the edge of the field, a large white rabbit had appeared, its head lowered as it ate the grass. It's a demon rabbit, Lin Qingchen whispered. A demon rabbit that grew up eating core foundation grass. Ah, the taste must be very good. It's also very nutritious. It's mine. Lin Qingxue unsheathed her twin blades once more and inched closer to the rabbit. The demon rabbit's long ears suddenly twitched, apparently sensing the movement. It raised its head to reveal a pair of red eyes, then turned around and ran into the forest at the side. Hey, don't run! Lin Qingxue shouted as she chased into the forest. Qingxue! Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen called out to her, but she disappeared into the forest in the blink of an eye. Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen hurried into the forest. Demon rabbit, if you keep running, I won't be so polite anymore. Lin Qingxue's voice came from the front again, and the two hurriedly chased after her. Qingxue, don't chase after it. Lin Qingchen ran as she chased after Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan dashed through the forest, and after a while she finally caught up to Lin Qingchen. However, the scene in front of her left her dumbfounded. Lin Qingxue was hugging the demon rabbit in her arms, and not far from her were nearly 20 brown beasts the size of hunting dogs. They're fiery-maned hounds. Qiuqiu shouted in Yun Ruoyan's mind. Fiery-maned hounds are pack animals. Although they're low-rank beasts, a pack of them shouldn't be underestimated. Lin Qingchen had also rushed over, and she was also stunned by the scene. All three of them held their breaths. Lin Qingxue slowly turned around to look at her two sisters, her expression as if she wanted to cry. Qingxue, let the demon rabbit go, Yun Ruoyan ordered. If the rabbit could divert the hound's attention for a moment, they'd have a chance to escape. Fighting 20 fiery-maned hounds with just the three of them would be courting death, so it was best to run. Lin Qingxue nodded obediently and let go of the rabbit. Freed from its restraints, the demon rabbit immediately jumped out of Lin Qingxue's arms and tried to escape. However, the hounds were even faster than it. One of the hounds leaped out of the pack and caught the rabbit in its mouth in the blink of an eye. As for the rest of the hounds, they continued to stare at the three of them. They slowly spread out, forming a circle around the three of them. Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue stood back to back, each taking out their own weapons. Yun Ruoyan's weapon was a common family sword, Lin Qingxue's twin daggers, and Lin Qingchen's whip was unsheathed from her waist. Both Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen were 5th-rank blade masters, and logically speaking they should be much stronger than Yun Ruoyan, who was only 3rd rank. However, the strength that Yun Ruoyan had displayed far exceeded her cultivation. Moreover, she had been known as a cultivation genius since she was a child. Even though her cultivation had deteriorated, she still held a special place in her sisters' hearts. As a result, both Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen followed her lead. Yun Ruoyan stared unblinkingly at the pack of hounds. Suddenly, one of the larger hound's eyes lit up and Yun Ruoyan caught it. That hound wasn't attacking anyone else but Yun Ruoyan. In that instant, Yun Ruoyan's desire to fight was ignited. Magical beasts were intelligent and could even determine the cultivation of their foes. This hound must have noticed that Yun Ruoyan's cultivation was the lowest among the 3 of them, so it decided to target her. Unfortunately, the hound's cleverness had backfired, and its opponent was undoubtedly the strongest of the 3. Yun Ruoyan was afraid that the hound would accidentally injure her sisters, so she didn't try to dodge. Instead, she raised her sword and met the hound head-on. Yun Ruoyan's sword clashed with the hound's claws. Yun Ruoyan didn't use the bracelet's pocket dimension, but her own strength to fight the hound head-on. Using her sword to lock the hound's claws in place, she raised her leg and kicked the hound's stomach. The hound was sent flying by the kick, crouching on the ground and moaning softly. Hearing the low moans, the hounds quickly split into 3 groups, separating the 3 of them. This way each of them would have to deal with 6 or 7 hounds. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen also brandished their blades and whips, clashing with the hounds. Hounds were constantly sent flying, but others would quickly return. With their strength, it wouldn't be a problem for each of them to deal with 3 hounds, but 6 would be a one-on-one battle. Their stamina would be at a disadvantage. Moreover, the sky was getting darker and it would be even more dangerous at night. Looks like I'll have to use the bracelet's pocket dimension. After sending a hound flying, Yun Ruoyan twisted the bracelet on her wrist. Under Qiuqiu's guidance, Yun Ruoyan was now able to use the bracelet's pocket dimension as she pleased. As the bracelet spun, a powerful force began to circulate throughout Yun Ruoyan's body. When the larger hound pounced on her again, Yun Ruoyan leapt up and stabbed her sword into its head. Ah! At this moment Lin Qingxue suddenly screamed. Yun Ruoyan flung the hound's corpse aside and turned around to see Lin Qingxue being surrounded by 5 hounds, while another was flying in the air, aiming for Lin Qingxue's waist. Yun Ruoyan wanted to save her, but they'd been too far apart during the fight and she couldn't put out a nearby fire. Lin Qingchen, who was closer to her, was also caught in the middle of a pincer attack. Just as Lin Qingxue was about to be bitten by the hound's sharp teeth, an arrow suddenly flew towards her. The arrow pierced through the air and into the hound's neck, causing it to fall to the ground just inches away from Lin Qingxue. Immediately after, a figure dashed out from the forest to the side. Yun Ruoyan saw that it was none other than Zhou Yifeng, whom she'd parted ways with not long ago. Zhou Yifeng held a bow and arrow in his hands and his movements were swift. Every arrow hit a hound's vitals and every one of them died. Very quickly, 4 hounds had died by his hand. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen were both exhausted from the fight, and they huddled together, barely managing to fend off the hound's attacks. Yun Ruoyan mustered all the strength in her body, and her sword danced through the air. The hounds surrounding her quickly fell to her sword. Yun Ruoyan and Zhou Yifeng huddled together, 1 sword and 1 bow. Finally, just as night was about to fall, they'd killed all the hounds. Qingxue, Qingchen, are you all right? Yun Ruoyan sheathed her sword and looked at her sisters with concern. We're fine, Lin Qingchen replied. But Lin Qingxue walked over to Zhou Yifeng's side. You're injured. Zhou Yifeng looked at the scratch on his arm and replied carelessly, it's nothing, just a small wound. How could it be a small wound? You've lost so much blood. Lin Qingxue hurriedly took out a bottle and poured the medicinal powder on Zhou Yifeng's arm, then used a handkerchief to bandage his wound. Yun Ruoyan didn't stop Lin Qingxue from treating Zhou Yifeng's wound. Why are you still following us? Where's your sister? We weren't following you. Zhou Linner's petite figure stood up from a nearby bush and walked over to Zhou Yifeng's back. What a coincidence. Yun Ruoyan couldn't believe it. They'd clearly been going in 2 different directions, so how could they have run into each other? Sister Ruoyan. Lin Qingxue looked at Yun Ruoyan pleadingly. Yun Ruoyan's tone softened. But I still have to thank you for your help. Otherwise my sister would have suffered. As she spoke, Yun Ruoyan took out a bag of foundational chi powder and handed it to her. Here's some foundational chi powder. We're going to be in the territory for 10 days, so you'll definitely need it. The two siblings looked a little too shabby. While a foundational chi powder might not be much to the scions of the larger families, it was definitely precious to them. Chapter 26. Zhu Yifeng looked at the pouch, then at Yun Ruoyan, his face still expressionless, his eyes bright. No need to thank me, he replied. Even if you hadn't been the ones being attacked today, I would have helped you. Zhu Yifeng's eyes seemed to give Yun Ruoyan the impression that he wasn't human, but rather a magical beast. Did your face get injured just now? Yifeng suddenly asked. Yun Ruoyan subconsciously touched her face. Indeed, there were traces of blood. Ever since her birthmark had been scratched, it hadn't fully healed and pus and blood would occasionally seep out. Lin Zainan had said that the pus and blood that seeped out were actually poison, and that it was a good thing that it had seeped out. As a result, he hadn't given her any medicine, hoping that the wound would heal naturally. However, the wound looked too frightening, so Yun Ruoyan left a tuft of hair to cover it. The battle had been too intense, and the wound that had just healed a little had torn open again, causing her hair to stick to the pus and blood. It's just a small wound, don't worry. Yun Ruoyan took the handkerchief Lin Qingshan handed her and wiped the pus and blood off her face. Did the two of you come here because of the scent of wild beasts? Yun Ruoyan didn't hide her wariness and repulsion toward the Zhou siblings. Lin Qingshan walked over and tugged on Yun Ruoyan's sleeve, but Yun Ruoyan didn't budge. Yun Ruoyan would naturally remember the kindness of strangers, but she couldn't let down her guard in the slightest. Zhu Yifeng looked at Yun Ruoyan, but didn't explain anything. He bent down and carried his sister on his back. Until we meet again, he said before turning to leave. Brother Zhou, Lin Qingshan called out from behind him. It's getting dark, so why don't we rest together tonight? We can look after each other and tomorrow morning, we'll part ways, alright? He looked at Yun Ruoyan as he said this. Zhu Yifeng stopped, but he didn't turn around, clearly waiting for Yun Ruoyan to speak. Yun Ruoyan finally sighed. It's indeed safer to have more people in the forest at night. And these hounds have to be cleaned up. Many of them were killed by you, so we can't take your spoils of war. Although the maned hound was only a low-level magical beast, its inner core was still worth some money. The few of them began to dig out the inner core. Just as she was busy, Qiuqiu's voice rang out in her mind once more. Master, there's a group of people coming this way. A group of people? Yun Ruoyan stopped what she was doing. Which family are they from? In her past life, Yun Ruoyan had heard of some of the secrets of the imperial territory. In order to reduce the number of competitors or to obtain more treasures, some clans would resort to underhanded means to the disciples of other clans who entered the mystic realm with them. Sometimes not only did they steal the treasures, they would even kill people to cover up their crimes. Are they strong? Yun Ruoyan asked. Based on their auras, there are 2 4th-rank and 2 5th-rank blade masters. The other side had 4 people and their side also had 4 people, so they were not afraid. However, Zhu Yifeng was an unknown factor. Yun Ruoyan's gaze landed on Zhu Yifeng. As if sensing her gaze, Zhu Yifeng turned back to look at her. Just as their eyes met, an abrupt female voice rang out. Oh my, why is it so crowded here? The crowd turned to see that the speaker was none other than Yun Ruoyan's sister, the 5th miss of the Yun family, Yun Ruoyu. Naturally, she was accompanied by Yun Ruoyao and Yi Qianying. As for the other youth, it was the young master of the Pei family, Pei Zio. When Pei Zio saw Yun Ruoyan, he hurriedly walked over, a smile on his face. Ruan, I thought it would take some effort to find you, but I didn't expect to bump into you here. Yun Ruoyan frowned. Did this guy have amnesia? Hadn't she already told him that day at the Pei Manor? Why was he still so persistent? Why are you here? Lin Qingshan stepped forward. We were clearly heading in opposite directions, so how did we bump into each other? Yun Ruoyu also stepped forward. I was just about to ask you the same thing. We were clearly heading in separate directions, so how did we end up here? What do you mean? Lin Qingshan asked curiously. Are you saying that we followed you? What a joke. Of course we did. Yun Ruoyu glared at them. We walked along the same path, and it must have been because your path wasn't easy to walk, so you turned around and took our path instead. The two of them began to argue back and forth, unwilling to back down. Yun Ruoyan frowned. Although Yun Ruoyu was arrogant and domineering, her personality was rather honest and she wouldn't lie so boldly. I really wasn't following you just now, but I don't know why we bumped into each other, Shui Yifeng whispered to Yun Ruoyan's side. Yun Ruoyan's frown deepened. Could it be that we'd walked into a maze realm? There was a maze realm within the imperial territory, but it wasn't common. Only those with bad luck would enter it. We might have walked into a maze realm, Paizio said. In her past life, it was Paizio who had told Yun Ruoyan about the maze realm, so Yun Ruoyan wasn't at all surprised by his words. After entering the maze realm, all paths, no matter which direction they lead, will converge at the same place, just as if you're walking in circles, Paizio continued to explain. Then what do we do? Yi Qianying walked up to Paizio's side and tugged on his sleeve, looking like a frightened little girl. Brother Zio, will we die here? Yi Qianying was petite and adorable, and when she spoke in such a coy voice, he couldn't help but feel pity for her. No, there's always an exit to the imperial territory. As long as we find the exit, we'll be able to leave. Then what if we can't find the exit? Shui Yifeng asked, his eyes even brighter in the darkness. Paizio hesitated for a moment before replying, even if we can't find the exit after the trial ends 10 days later, someone will naturally come to save us. As long as we survive within 10 days, we'll be fine. In that case, we won't be able to get into Kongming Academy. Yun Ruoyao, who had been silent all this time, sounded indignant. If she couldn't get into Kongming Academy despite her family's recommendation, it would be extremely embarrassing for her. After all, she was the most talented daughter of the Yun family. It didn't matter if others couldn't get into Kongming Academy, but she had to. When they found out that they were trapped in the imperial territory, everyone's expressions darkened and their brows furrowed. It's too late now. Tomorrow we'll start looking for the exit. With so many of us, we'll definitely find it. Paizio was unusually optimistic. The group lit a campfire and rested on the spot. The meat of the whole-maned hound naturally became their dinner. The two groups each prepared 2 hounds and placed them over the fire to roast. Yun Ruoyan, the Lin sisters and Shui Yifeng siblings began to divide the cores. The earthy red cores piled up one by one, and there were 24 of them in total. That hound looks so cold, but its cores are so cute. Lin Qingxue smiled happily as she looked at the cores on the ground. The others were all amused by her innocent expression. If they were to remain trapped in the mystic realm, they would lose the opportunity to enter Kongming Academy. As such, obtaining treasures for the family was of utmost importance. Yun Ruoyan's group happily divided up the treasures, while Yun Ruoyao's group could only sit by the side and watch. That wasn't a good feeling at all. Originally, they had also encountered a group of low-rank beasts, but their numbers were simply too great. Of the 3 of them, only Yun Ruoyao's cultivation was slightly higher, and she was able to escape unscathed from the attacks of the beasts. Yun Ruoyu was having a hard time and Yi Qianying was even worse off. When she was fighting with the magical beasts, she had been so scared that her voice had gone hoarse, and it was still hoarse. Fortunately, her voice was loud enough to attract Paizio over, and Yun Ruoyao and Paizio were finally able to repel the beasts. However, because of the 2 burdens, they weren't able to kill the beasts and obtain their cores. As a result, the 4 of them ended up empty-handed. There's 24 cores here. Yun Ruoyan pointed them out one by one, then placed 10 in front of Shui Yifeng. These are yours and the rest are for the 3 of us. This time, Shui Yifeng did not decline and kept the inner core. Look at how close eldest sister is to the Lin sisters. I don't think she's a member of the Yun family anymore. Yun Ruoyu began to speak sarcastically once more. Yun Ruoyao didn't respond, but a cold smile hung on her lips. Once they were out of the mystic realm, she would definitely tell her father that Yun Ruoyan wasn't willing to travel with them. Madame An had told her that although her father's opinion of Yun Ruoyan had changed somewhat, he was still worried that Yun Ruoyao would hold a grudge against him. As a wife-born daughter being ignored by her own family and disliked by her own father, she was bound to be filled with resentment. It was just that Yun Ruoyan was very good at pretending. When she didn't have the ability, she would pretend that she wasn't competitive and that anyone could bully her in order to numb them. Now that she had recovered some of her cultivation, she would immediately disregard them. If her father were to find out that his wife-born daughter didn't care about the Yun family at all, she didn't believe that Yun Ruoyan would still have a place in the Yun family. Yi Qianying looked at Yun Ruyao's cold smile and could guess what she was thinking. However, she didn't expose her. Instead, she comforted Yun Ruyu. Those are Sister Ruyan's sisters, so it's only natural that they get to know each other. Sister, don't worry too much. By Yun Ruyan's side, the entire hound had been roasted over the fire until it glistened with oil, and the aroma of the burnt meat grew stronger and stronger. Zhou Yifeng had gathered some herbs from somewhere and applied them to the roasted meat. Immediately, a faint, spicy aroma began to spread. Ah, it smells so good. Everyone present exclaimed in unison. On the other hand, the people sitting on the other side didn't have such an easy time. The 3 young mistresses and a young master were usually the kind of people who were used to having their clothes handed to them. Now they really couldn't do it themselves, and it would be a miracle if they managed to roast the meat properly. Yun Ruyu looked at the roasted meat in her hands, frustrated. She threw it into the fire and complained, "What kind of rotten meat is this?" Her eyes were full of resentment. Chapter 27. The meat in Yun Ruyu's mouth had been roasted by Pei Zio. Yun Ruyu didn't do it herself, but she was very picky with her words, and her undisguised disgust made Pei Zio feel very embarrassed. Pei Zio was holding the roasted meat that he'd just sliced from the hound's body. He'd been about to hand it to her, but his face had turned red and he paused awkwardly. Yi Qianying took the roasted meat from him and took a bite before turning to Yun Ruyu. "It's not as bad as you say. Sister Ruyu, you're too picky. If you like it, you can eat it all. It's burnt on the outside and raw on the inside, and I can't eat a single bite." Yun Ruyu's face was still full of displeasure. "Brother Zio, it's already not easy for you to do this for the first time." Yi Qianying looked at Pei Zio with a reverent expression. "Qianying." Pei Zio called out Yi Qianying's name softly, his heart about to melt at her smile. About half a year ago, Pei Yingxiong had a serious discussion with Pei Zio. The gist of the discussion was that he wanted Pei Zio to visit the Yun household more often and try to win the favor of Yun Ruyan, the second daughter of the Yun family. The fact that Yun Ruyan was an ugly wastrel was well known throughout the Li kingdom, but Pei Zio had no choice but to follow his father's instructions. Pei Yingxiong promised that once he married the ugly girl, she'd be nothing more than a decoration. Once the Pei family overtook the Yun family, he'd immediately divorce her and remarry. Pei Zio had spent quite a bit of effort on Yun Ruyan before his reincarnation. Yun Ruyan was timid and self-abased, and he had to speak to her softly to avoid scaring her. Yun Ruyan was also very sensitive, and a single unkind glance from others would cause her to cry. When others saw the birthmark on Yun Ruyan's face, they would look at her in disgust, but he could only force himself to ignore it and act as if it didn't matter to him. Gradually he managed to gain Yun Ruyan's favor. He'd known that Yun Ruyao and Yi Qianying had plotted to push Yun Ruyan into the frosty lake, and he'd wanted to win her heart in one fell swoop. He hadn't expected that he'd almost lost his life. Fortunately, he had managed to survive in the end. However, what he found strange was that Yun Ruyan's attitude toward him had suddenly taken a 180-degree turn. Pei Zio hadn't been very interested in Yun Ruyan in the first place, but Yun Ruyan's sudden coldness only served to ignite his desire for victory. He didn't believe it. He was the only son of the elegant Pei family. Could it be that he couldn't even handle an ugly girl? He suppressed the good impression he had of Yi Qianying and turned his gaze elsewhere. On the other side, Zhou Yifeng was cutting the roasted fierce-maned hound into pieces. From time to time oil would drip from the burnt meat on the charcoal, making a sizzling sound, which stimulated the secretion of everyone's saliva. The 4 girls couldn't help but stare at Zhou Yifeng's movements, and even Yun Ruyan couldn't help but gulp. Zhou Yifeng sliced off a large piece of meat, but he didn't hand it to his sister. Instead he passed it to Yun Ruyan. Yun Ruyan hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take it. Instead of keeping it for herself, however, she gave it to Lin Qingxue. "Thank you, Sister Ruyan." Lin Qingxue didn't stand on ceremony and took a big bite. "Wow, it's so delicious. It's even better than the chefs at the capital's first-rate inn." Lin Qingxue exclaimed exaggeratedly, causing Yun Ruyu to roll her eyes. Just as Yun Ruyan was about to stand up, another piece of meat was handed to her. She frowned slightly. "I like to do it myself." Then she stood up, walked over to the roasted meat and used her dagger to cut off 2 pieces of meat, one for Lin Qingchen and the other for herself. It's really delicious." Yun Ruyan took a bite and praised sincerely. I didn't expect you to be so good at cooking. Brother Zhou, you're amazing, Lin Xianxia muttered as she ate while Lin Qingqian ate with relish. Zhou Yifeng's cold, expressionless face revealed a rare smile. We beastkin often hunt in the mountains, so we've accumulated some secret techniques for roasting meat. As he spoke, he cut the meat into small cubes and placed them on a large green leaf before handing them to Zhuolin. Zhuolin took the cubes and ate them slowly. Only then did Zhou Yifeng take a few bites himself. Apart from you and your sister, who else is there in your clan? Yun Ruoyan asked casually, a piece of meat in her mouth. Zhou Yifeng paused when he heard Yun Ruoyan's question. Yun Ruoyan thought that he wouldn't answer her question, but he replied calmly, my sister and I are the only ones left in my family. As for whether there are any other lost tribesmen, I don't know. The beastkin were a unique existence on the Qinyuan continent. Legend had it that beastkin were the offspring of humans and magical beasts. In the past, they had always been slaves of human nobles, taming and hunting beasts for the humans. 100 years ago, a warrior emerged from the beastkin race and led his tribesmen to defeat the humans, ending their 1,000-year slavery. This warrior took with him a large amount of wealth that he had plundered from the humans and moved to the back of the Yueli Mountains, where he founded the beastkin kingdom. In a short period of time, the beastkin kingdom, the Li kingdom, the Yu kingdom, the Mo kingdom, and the Qin kingdom became known as the 5 kingdoms of the Qinyuan continent. The warrior who founded the beastkin kingdom was known as the Beast King. But 18 years ago, the Beast King, in the prime of his life, suddenly died mysteriously and the kingdom fell apart. The beastkin were once again scattered across the 4 kingdoms, living a nomadic life. Many humans coveted the treasures that the Beast King had plundered from the humans, and they captured beastkin to force them to reveal their whereabouts. Under such persecution, the beastkin population dwindled. What Yun Ruoyan found strange was how Zhou Yifeng and his sister Beastkin had managed to gain access to the imperial territory. Zhou Yifeng seemed to notice Yun Ruoyan's confusion, and he answered her question without waiting for her to ask. One time I went hunting in the mountains and accidentally saved a noble lord. That lord granted me a wish, which is why I'm here with my sister now. Zhou Yifeng's honesty made Yun Ruoyan feel a little uncomfortable, as if she were jealous of a noble lord. You don't have to tell me all this, Yun Ruoyan replied. Aren't beastkin supposed to be wary of humans? This Zhou Yifeng was truly an exception. If Yun Ruoyan remembered correctly, during their first face-to-face conversation, Zhou Yifeng had revealed his true identity as a beastkin. I believe you. Zhou Yifeng looked at Yun Ruoyan with bright eyes. You believe me? Yun Ruoyan looked back at him, her gaze uncertain. Why? This is the first time we've met. Because there's a familiar smell on you. What smell? I'm not sure, but it's a very familiar and intimate smell. Zhou Yifeng looked at Yun Ruoyan, his eyes glowing like those of a magical beast. Don't tell me this guy smelled my scent. Qiuqiu's voice rang out. Yun Ruoyan's heart trembled. Could this fellow's sense of smell extend into the pocket dimension of her bracelet? Yun Ruoyan's attitude turned cold once more. You look like an honest man, but I didn't expect you to use such a method to strike up a conversation. I'm not. Zhou Yifeng hurriedly waved his hands. All right, I'm tired, so I'm going to rest. Yun Ruoyan didn't want to hear his explanation. She stood up, walked to the other side and lay down to sleep. In the middle of the night, Yun Ruoyan was shaken awake by someone. When she opened her eyes, she saw Lin Qingxia looking at her with a pained expression. What's the matter? She asked. I ate too much meat and drank some cold water, so my stomach hurts. Sister Rung, can you accompany me to relieve myself? Lin Qingxia pleaded. The two of them found a secluded spot, and Yun Ruoyan stood guard while Lin Qingxia went to relieve herself. Yun Ruoyan looked around in boredom. Suddenly she saw a patch of grass glowing faintly. She walked over, and using the moonlight that shone through the gaps in the trees, she found a pile of animal innards in the grass. Zhou Yifeng must have tossed them there when he was dealing with the hound. Strangely, there was something in the innards that was glowing faintly green. Yun Ruoyan pulled out her sword and pried open the innards, revealing the glowing object within. To her surprise, she found that it was a beast core. Yun Ruoyan wiped the core clean and held it in her hands. She could still smell a faint medicinal aroma. It was a demon rabbit's core. It must have been the maned hound that ate the demon rabbit. Before it could digest the demon rabbit's inner core, It was slaughtered and eaten by them. Demon rabbits were magical beasts that had grown up eating all sorts of herbs, and their cores had the effect of replenishing energy and detoxifying poison. In fact, this one was even more valuable than 100 hounds' cores. Sister Ruian, what are you doing over there? Lin Qingshue's voice came from behind her. With a flip of her hand, Yun Ruian stored the beast core in her pocket dimension and turned around without a word. I saw a firefly just now and I wanted to catch it to play with, but I scared it away, haha. Lin Qingshue's face darkened. Since when had Ruian become so mischievous? The two sisters returned to their rooms to rest and they slept all the way until dawn. The next morning the group prepared to set off in search of the exit. Naturally, Yun Ruian suggested that they split up. Neither Yun Ruiyao nor Yun Ruoyu objected, but Pei Zio suggested that he stay with Yun Ruian. His reason was that he wanted to protect Yun Ruian in order to thank her for saving his life with the core foundation pill. I think it's best if we don't split up, Yi Qianying suggested. We don't know much about the territory, and if we encounter another beast horde, it'll be safer if we have more people. Yun Ruiyao listened to Yi Qianying's words, and given that her group was indeed too weak, she ignored Lin Qingshue's mockery and Yun Ruian's cold rejection and shamelessly followed behind Yun Ruian's group. I saw it first. Yun Ruoyu and Lin Qingxue glared at each other, neither of them willing to give in. In their hands they were each holding the head and root of a purplish-red herb. This was already the third time this morning that the two girls were fighting over it. Perhaps it was fate that brought Yun Ruoyu and Lin Qingxue together, but they always found treasures at the same time and grabbed them at the same time. Chapter 28. I was the one who discovered it first. How can you be so shameless? Yun Ruoyu shouted at Lin Qingxue, her spittle splattering all over her face. Lin Qingxue turned her head away in disgust, but her face was still smiling. But I'm fast. Look, I'm holding the head of this purple primrose in my hand. You. Yun Ruoyu's eyes were about to spit fire, but she couldn't do anything to Lin Qingxue. Suddenly, a white light flashed by, slicing the purple primrose in two, and both Lin Qingxue and Yun Ruoyu staggered back a couple of steps. If you keep dawdling like this, how long will it take for us to find the exit? Yun Ruiyao lectured the two of them. But it was clearly me. Purple primrose isn't anything special. Do you think the Yuns lack it? Yun Ruoyu still wanted to argue, but Yun Ruiyao interrupted her. Finding the exit is the most important thing. After saying that, Yun Ruiyao took the lead and continued walking forward. The group walked for half a day before returning to the spot where they had rested the night before. After a few twists and turns, they finally exited the maze by nightfall. Are we out of the maze? Yun Ruoyan asked Pei Zio, who had been by her side the entire time. Based on her previous life's experience, she knew that Pei Zio was quite familiar with the environment of the maze. No, but there's hope. Pei Zio handed her a flask of water. Sister Ruoyan, have some water. Yun Ruoyan was naturally disgusted by his hypocrisy. Ignoring him, she quickened her pace and left him behind. Just as he was about to catch up, Yi Qianying's pitiful voice came from behind. Brother Zio, can I have a sip of your water? He stopped in his tracks and handed over the kettle. Night quickly fell and the group who had been running all day stopped to rest for the night. Zhou Yifeng started a fire and as soon as the charcoal came out he put out the fire. He took out the leftover roasted meat from the night before, cut it into several large pieces, wrapped them tightly in green leaves and buried them in the charcoal to steam. Not long after, a rich, meaty aroma wafted out of the charcoal. Wow, it smells so good. Lin Qingxue picked up the green leaf Zhou Yifeng had passed to her and opened it. She saw that the small pieces of meat that had been roasted last night had been thoroughly steamed, with gravy seeping out of them. Lin Qingxue ate a piece and closed her eyes in bliss. Intoxicated, she said, even though I ate too much last night, I still have an appetite. Yun Ruoyu could only gnaw on the wild fruits she had found in the forest as she glared at Lin Qingxue. Because everyone was in a hurry, no one mentioned hunting for food that day. When it was finally time to rest at night, he was so hungry that he felt weak all over, but he didn't have the energy to go hunting. At this moment, even the usually arrogant Yun Ruiyao couldn't help but look at the other side and gulp. Of course, Yun Ruoyan and the others wouldn't be so kind as to offer them food of their own volition. Instead, they continued to gorge themselves on their own meat. Zhou Xian, who had been silent all this time, suddenly looked very nervous. Big brother, there's the aura of a magical beast. Almost at the same time, Yun Ruoyan received Qiuqiu's warning. It's a 7th rank magical beast, and its cultivation has already surpassed that of a blade master. None of you are a match for it. Then we can only run. Yun Ruoyan stood up and was about to call for everyone to flee, but Qiuqiu interrupted. It's too late. Not only is this magical beast powerful, it's also adept at concealing its aura. By the time I discovered it, it was already too late. As soon as Qiuqiu finished speaking, Yi Qianying screamed. What a big magical beast, how scary. Coincidentally, right in Yi Qianying's direction, a large tiger-like beast with long fangs walked out of the forest. As it walked, quite a few smaller trees were torn apart by its fangs, a testament to how sharp its fangs were. It's the saber-toothed tiger. Pei Zio's voice trembled as he said, I heard my father say that he almost died under the fangs of the saber-toothed tiger when he entered the secret realm to train. Yun Ruoyan looked at the saber-toothed tiger slowly walking toward them, her heart filled with curiosity. With such a large body, every step it took would cause the ground to shake and trees to snap. Even if it could conceal its cultivation, it couldn't have caused such a huge commotion. Why hadn't Qiuqiu noticed it? The saber-toothed tiger didn't seem to be in a hurry. In its eyes, Yun Ruoyan's group was already its prey. Brother Zio, what a scary magical beast. Yi Qianying hid behind Pei Zio and Yun Ruoyan in fear, even reaching out to tug at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan shook her off in disgust. Everyone present was so frightened by the saber-toothed tiger's aura that their faces turned pale. For a moment they didn't even have the will to fight. Everyone listen to me. Yun Ruoyan suppressed her fear. A saber-toothed tiger's core is a treasure that's hard to come by in 100 years. Although it looks powerful, we have more people on our side, so we might not necessarily lose. Let's all work together to kill it and split its core evenly. Everyone present had been cultivating in the family academy, and they'd never seen such a ferocious beast before. Only Zhui Yifeng and Yun Ruoyan were able to maintain their composure. Although the saber-toothed tiger's footsteps were slow, each step covered a large distance and it quickly closed in on them. Yun Ruoyan saw that everyone had lost their will to fight and knew that they couldn't delay any longer. Either we fight or we die. She unsheathed her sword. Everyone surround it, then find a weak spot to attack. Lin Qingxue, Lin Qingchen, and Zhui Yifeng spread out according to Yun Ruoyan's instructions, surrounding the saber-toothed tiger. Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu hesitated for a moment before gritting their teeth and forming a circle around the tiger. Yi Qianying followed behind Pei Zio. Although she had also unsheathed her sword, her hand was trembling, and her face was as frightened as ever. The saber-toothed tiger looked around at the humans surrounding it. When its gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan, it suddenly sniffed. Then for some reason the tiger's eyes slowly turned red, and it stared intently at Yun Ruoyan. Not good, it's targeting you. Qiuqiu called out anxiously from within the pocket dimension. Once the saber-toothed tiger identifies a target, it'll definitely capture her. Mistress, strike first. Zhui Yifeng, cover me. Yun Ruoyan turned to Zhui Yifeng by her side. Without hesitation she raised her sword and attacked the saber-toothed tiger's face. Zhui Yifeng knocked an arrow. Whoosh whoosh, whoosh whoosh whoosh. 5 arrows flew past Yun Ruoyao's body, heading straight for the saber-toothed tiger. The saber-toothed tiger hadn't expected the little human in front of it to not be scared out of its wits, but to actually attack it. Even more unexpected was that before the little human could reach it, a volley of arrows had already arrived in front of it. However, these were clearly child's play in front of it. It was a 7th rank magical beast and it could fight against 5th rank human summoners. The humans in front of it were far weaker than it was. It swung its head and its 2 huge tusks easily cut off the 5 arrows that were shot at it. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, swoosh swoosh swoosh. As Yun Ruoyan sprinted forward, another 3 arrows flew out. At the same time Yun Ruoyan turned the bracelet on her wrist, and the bracelet's power quickly spread throughout her entire body. When the saber-toothed tiger once again swung its head to cut off the arrow, it heard a poochie sound and felt a sharp pain in its chest. When the saber-toothed tiger looked down, it saw that the little human had stabbed the entire sword into its own body. Roar! The saber-toothed tiger let out an angry roar. It shook its head and its large tusks swung toward Yunruoyan. The saber-toothed tiger's tusks were flat, knife-shaped and incomparably sharp. They could easily slice through a tree, much less a human body. "Sister Ruan, be careful." The Lin sisters cried out in fright. The Yun sisters also opened their eyes wide, and Yiqianying hid behind Pei Zio, sticking her head out as if she wanted to look but didn't dare. In the face of danger, however, Yun Ruoyan calmed down. She decisively let go of the sword in her hand and leaped back, narrowly avoiding the saber-toothed tiger's attack. After being attacked, the saber-toothed tiger became agitated, and it began to chase after Yun Ruoyan with its fangs, treating everyone else as if they were air. "Sister Ruan, let's help you." Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen joined the fray, while Zhou Yifeng stood a little further away, constantly shooting arrows at the saber-toothed tiger. However, his arrows were too weak to deal much damage to the saber-toothed tiger. Unless Yun Ruoyan managed to hit its weak spot, it would be as easy as being bitten by an ant. "Sister Ruoyao, let's go." Yun Ruoyu looked toward Yun Ruoyao by her side, and Yun Ruoyao looked at Yun Ruoyan with a complicated expression. Yun Ruoyan's movements were fast and agile, and she was able to dodge the saber-toothed tiger's attacks every time. The sword in her hand was the same as their family's, and it wasn't a particularly powerful weapon, but she was able to pierce through the body of a powerful magical beast. This wasn't something a third-rank blade master could do. Why had her useless sister suddenly become so strong? "Brother Zio, do you think we'll be able to kill this beast if we attack together?" Yiqianying asked. Pei Zio frowned. "It's just a 7th-rank magical beast, so how could we possibly kill it? Right now they're only fighting it head-on, and they'll run out of stamina very soon." Pei Zio's analysis wasn't wrong at all. Without a weapon, Yun Ruoyan could only rely on her speed and her two sisters' cover to escape. On the other hand, the saber-toothed tiger only defended against Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue. Its reddish-brown eyes were fixated on Yun Ruoyan, and all of its attacks were aimed at her. If this continued, she would die without a doubt. As she ran, Yun Ruoyan glanced at Yun Ruoyao's group. Seeing that they were just there to watch the show, she felt a surge of anger. "Sure, you want to see how I die, right? Then don't blame me for dragging you down with me." Yun Ruoyan turned around and charged toward Yun Ruoyao's group. Chapter 29. Under the bright moonlight, Yun Ruoyan's red robes were particularly eye-catching. "Ah, she's coming in our direction." Yiqianying was the first to cry out, panicked and at a loss. Yun Ruoyao and the others also turned pale with fright when they saw Yun Ruoyan rushing toward them. After all, Yun Ruoyan was now a live target for the saber-toothed tiger. She was clearly trying to drag them down with her. What a vicious woman. Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu cursed her in their hearts. Yun Ruoyan didn't care about their thoughts. She used a strange movement technique to quickly pass between Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu, hiding behind them. The saber-toothed tiger's two fangs arrived right after. Unable to dodge in time, the two girls could only raise their swords to block the attack. Yun Ruoyao felt as if the sword in her hand had struck an incomparably hard steel wall when it struck the saber-toothed tiger's fangs, and the impact numbed her hand. She was forced back a few steps by the force of the blow, and Yun Ruoyu was sent flying to the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. This was the difference between a 5th-rank and a 4th-rank blade master. Yun Ruoyao had been able to withstand a blow from the saber-toothed tiger, but Yun Ruoyu had suffered an internal injury. "Ah, Brother Zio, be careful." Yiqianying cried out. Seeing that Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu couldn't withstand a single blow, Yun Ruoyan had used a movement technique to hide behind Pei Zio. Although Pei Zio and Yun Ruoyao were both 5th-rank blade masters, Yun Ruoyao had only broken through to 5th rank less than half a year ago. If Yun Ruoyan remembered correctly, Pei Zio had been a 5th-rank blade master for almost 2 years. Based on her understanding of him, he should be able to withstand 3 blows from the saber-toothed tiger. Pei Zio was wielding a spear that could lengthen and shorten at will. After blocking 2 of the tiger's attacks, he found an opening and thrust his spear toward the tiger's eye. As he thrust, the spear instantly doubled in length, and it looked as if it was about to pierce into the tiger's eye. However, the saber-toothed tiger had become more cautious after having suffered at Yun Ruoyan's hands once. It tilted its head to the side and caught Pei Zio's spear between its fangs. Originally, the saber-toothed tiger wanted to break the spear, but it didn't expect the spear to be as tough as its fangs. Pei Zio was the only son of the Pei family. Ever since he had almost lost his life, Pei Yingxiong had placed his son's safety above all else. In order to ensure his son's safety in this trial, he had even passed on his own weapon, the cloud-smashing spear, to him. The saber-toothed tiger clamped down on the cloud-piercing spear, while Pei Zio held on tightly to the spear's shaft. The saber-toothed tiger shook its head violently, causing Pei Zio's feet to leave the ground. "Brother Zio, let go!" Qianying shouted from afar. Pei Zio clenched his teeth tightly. This was his father's treasure, and it would be painful for him to let go of it. However, in a life-and-death situation, his life was more important. In the end, Pei Zio released his grip, and his body was flung through the air like a kite with a broken string. Coincidentally, he crashed into Qianying. Ah! Qianying let out a pained scream. Yun Ruoyan, who had been watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but sigh. This shameless couple was truly fated. After shaking off Pei Zio, the saber-toothed tiger turned its head, its gaze still locked onto Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan felt strange. Why is it so fixated on me? Do I smell better than anyone else? As soon as the saber-toothed tiger released Yun Ruoyan, the spear stuck straight into the ground. Then it opened its jaws wide and lunged at Yun Ruoyan. At the start, the saber-toothed tiger had treated Yun Ruoyan like a cat playing with a mouse. But after this battle, its violent nature had been completely unleashed. Yun Ruoyan leaped high into the air, dodging the saber-toothed tiger's attack. Its massive fangs struck the ground where Yun Ruoyan had just been standing, creating a large crater. Yun Ruoyan rolled away, pulled out the spear from the ground and mimicked Pei Zio's attack. "Sister Ruoyan, throw me the spear." Pei Zio yelled at Yun Ruoyan. "The spear can only be wielded by a 5th-rank blade master or higher. You won't be able to use it." Pei Zio wanted to rush over, but Qianying held on tightly to his arm. "Brother Zio, I'm scared." She had been struck by Pei Zio's attack. Given her cultivation, she shouldn't have been injured by a heavy object, but whether intentionally or not, she had spat out a mouthful of blood. Pei Zio looked at Qianying in his arms. Her pale face was full of panic and blood was still dripping from the corner of her mouth. His heart was completely tied to her. Yun Ruoyan naturally ignored Pei Zio's words. Before the saber-toothed tiger could turn around, she thrust her spear forward. But because the spear was too heavy, she didn't have enough strength in the thrust. When it struck the saber-toothed tiger's thigh, it only penetrated a little. Roar! The saber-toothed tiger swung its massive tail at the spear, sending Yun Ruoyan flying far away. "You're courting death." Pei Zio cursed angrily. He'd clearly said that she wouldn't be able to use the spear, but she was still trying to show off. Seeing that it had finally taken down its target after so long, the saber-toothed tiger howled excitedly. Just as it was about to stab Yun Ruoyan to death with its fangs, a few arrows flew past its eyelids. The saber-toothed tiger looked in the direction of the arrows. Zhui Feng was hanging from a nearby tree, his bow drawn and aimed at the tiger. Taking advantage of the moment when the tiger's attention was diverted, Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue rushed over and stood in front of Yun Ruoyan. "Sister Ruoyan, are you all right?" The two of them turned back to look at Yun Ruoyan with concern. Yun Ruoyan tried to stand up, but her chest hurt. She could only use the spear to support her body and sit up. Just then Yun Ruoyao helped the injured Yun Ruoyu to Pei Zio's side. "We don't have to die with them," Yun Ruoyu said, clutching her chest. Her heart had been injured by the tiger's strength, and although she'd taken a life quintessence pill and managed to control her injuries, she couldn't continue fighting. "The saber-toothed tiger only has its eyes on her, so we have to escape quickly. Otherwise it won't let us go after them either," Yun Ruoyu continued. "I didn't expect Ruoyan to use us as scapegoats either." Yun Ruoyao's tone was full of disappointment. To think that we'd treated her like a sister. How could she be so vicious? By now, the two of them had long forgotten how they'd mistreated Yun Ruoyan, and how they'd schemed to push her into the lake. All they knew was that Yun Ruoyan was the most vicious woman in the world. That's right, she was the one who was heartless first, so she can't blame us for being unjust. Yun Ruoyu continued. "What if Uncle finds out that we abandoned Sister Ruoyan?" Qianying asked in a small voice. "Dead men tell no tales. If we don't say anything, no one will." Yun Ruoyao's eyes flashed fiercely. Even if he finds out, father won't say anything because we're trying to preserve the family's strength. Are you leaving or not? Yi Qianying looked pitifully at Pei Zhou, and Pei Yingxiong's words flashed through Pei Zhou's mind. I'd thought that daughter of the Yun family was a pushover, but I didn't expect her to be so hard to deal with. If we can't subdue her, we'll have to settle for the next best thing. Pei Zhou looked at Yi Qianying in his arms. Their lives were more important, and he'd come back tomorrow to retrieve the spear. By that time, even their corpses would have been devoured by the saber-toothed tiger. All right, let's go. Pei Zhou stood up, picked up Yi Qianying and followed the Yun sisters into the forest. As they entered the forest, he subconsciously turned around and met Yun Ruoyan's mocking gaze. Startled, he turned back and quickened his steps. Seeing Yun Ruoyao, Pei Zhou and the others flee, Yun Ruoyan's heart relaxed. With them around, she didn't dare reveal too much of her strength, and she didn't even dare to use too much of the energy in her bracelet. Even so, they were still shocked. If they were to reveal all of their strength, it would surely cause unnecessary trouble. Sister Ruoyan, they're running away. How cowardly. Lin Qingxue was half kneeling by Yun Ruoyan's side, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Her cultivation was similar to Yun Ruoyu's, and she had also been injured by the tiger's strength in the battle. I don't know what's wrong with the tiger, but it only attacked me. Yun Ruoyan panted. If you really can't beat it, don't worry about me and run. What are you saying, Sister Ruoyan? Lin Qingxue shouted angrily. We're sisters and we're supposed to live and die together. We're not like the Yun sisters running away on our own. Lin Qingxue spat on the ground twice, but her anger still wasn't appeased. Yun Ruoyan's heart warmed and she grabbed Lin Qingxue's hand. I won't let anything happen to you. At the front, Lin Qingchen and Zhui Yifeng were holding the tiger back, and it looked like they were about to lose. As Yun Ruoyan watched the battle unfold, she took out a life quintessence pill and popped it into her mouth. The pill melted in her mouth and a warm current flowed up her body, rapidly healing her wounds. This time, Yun Ruoyan no longer hid the spatial abilities of her bracelet. Instead, she focused all of her strength on her right hand, gripping the spear tightly as she stood up from the ground. Sister Ruoyan. Lin Qingchen stared at Yun Ruoyan in a daze. For some reason, this sister of hers seemed incredibly strong. Humph, it won't be so easy to take my life. Yun Ruoyan snorted coldly as she ran toward the tiger. Get out of the way. She called out to Lin Qingchen and Zhui Yifeng as she ran. When the two of them turned around, they saw a figure running toward them and they subconsciously retreated. When the tiger saw Yun Ruoyan running toward it, it let out a howl and charged forward. When the others saw that Yun Ruoyan was going to fight the tiger head-on, they couldn't help but turn pale with fright. Yun Ruoyan used a strange movement technique to dodge the tiger's attacks, then leapt high into the air the moment she landed. Holding the spear with both hands, she thrust it straight down toward the tiger's head. Puchi! The entire spear sank into the saber-toothed tiger's head. This series of actions was completed in the blink of an eye. Zhui Yifeng, Lin Qingchen, Lin Qingxue, and even Zhuo Linno, who was hiding in a distant tree, stared in disbelief. The saber-toothed tiger opened its jaws wide, but it didn't howl. Instead, it stared at Yun Ruoyan, its eyes wide with disbelief. Yun Ruoyan looked into the tiger's eyes, a provocative smile on her face. She stepped on the saber-toothed tiger's head and slowly pulled out the cloud-piercing spear. With a flip, she landed on the ground. Then the tiger's massive body collapsed at Yun Ruoyan's feet. Chapter 30. What in the world had just happened? Zhui Yifeng, Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue were all stunned. They had seen the saber-toothed tiger collapse at Yun Ruoyan's feet, unable to believe their eyes. Lin Qingchen was the closest to Yun Ruoyan, and she was the first to walk up to her and examine the saber-toothed tiger on the ground. The cloud-piercing spear had pierced right between the saber-toothed tiger's eyebrows, leaving behind a small but fatal wound. The saber-toothed tiger's eyes were lifeless and it was clearly dead. Sister Ruoyan, you really killed the saber-toothed tiger. Lin Qingchen raised her head to look at Yun Ruoyan, as if she couldn't believe what she had just seen. Sister Ruoyan, you're amazing. Lin Qingxue also walked over slowly, her tone both shocked and delighted. How did you do it? Your cultivation was clearly the lowest among all of us. Zhui Yifeng also walked up to the saber-toothed tiger, and after examining its wound he asked curiously. For someone with the lowest cultivation to be able to kill a magical beast that none of them had been able to kill, how could they not be shocked and bewildered? If Yun Ruoyan had managed to stab the saber-toothed tiger's first strike, it might have been a fluke, but the killing blow had been a head-on collision. Yun Ruoyan was only a third-rank cultivator, which was the weakest of all cultivators. Her battle strength was the weakest, but how did she do it? This question lingered in the minds of all three of them. At the moment, Yun Ruoyan didn't have the energy to answer their questions. After stabbing the tiger with her spear, all her energy had begun to leave her body. She felt as if she were floating, as if her own weight had disappeared, and then her head began to spin. She looked at the three people who had spoken to her one after another, and they all appeared to be double figures in her eyes. There were clearly 3 of them, but in her eyes there were 7, 8, and then 9 of them. Her vision darkened, and her steps became more and more unsteady. Just as she reached out a hand to the person closest to her, her body slumped to the ground. Zhou Yifeng felt that something was wrong with Yun Ruoyan, and just as he was about to ask her what was wrong, Yun Ruoyan reached out a hand to him. Zhou Yifeng stared blankly at Yun Ruoyan's outstretched hand. Before he could react, she had fallen to the side, and he hurriedly stepped forward to catch her. "Chirp chirp, master." In her daze she heard Yun Ruoyan's chirping. "Mistress, wake up, mistress." Yun Ruoyan slowly opened her eyes, her voice filled with anxiety. "Mistress, you're awake. You scared me to death." Xianxia circled around Yun Ruoyan. "How did I end up in the bracelet's pocket dimension?" Yun Ruoyan sat up and rubbed her forehead in confusion. "Xianxia, master, you just fought the saber-toothed tiger and fainted from overexertion." "Master, with your current level of cultivation, you can't use the bracelet's power too much. Once your profound chi is exhausted, you will be in danger unless you have the foundation pill." "Oh, so that's how it is. No wonder I suddenly felt like I was going to die." Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel scared after hearing Xiaoqiu's words. For someone like her who had been reborn, there was nothing more important than her life. The bracelet itself has a limit on how much power it can use. Usually, it can only borrow twice as much power as the user's own cultivation, Xiaoqiu continued. "Mistress, you're only a third-rank blade master right now, and the bracelet's power is only equivalent to that of a peak 5th-rank blade master. But when you were fighting the saber-toothed tiger, you borrowed power equivalent to that of a third-rank summoner, and that's far beyond what you can handle." Xiaoqiu suddenly blamed itself. "It's all my fault. I was afraid that mistress would be bullied, so I broke the restriction and almost killed you." "You are not wrong." Yun Ruoyan hurriedly comforted her. "If you hadn't removed the seal, we might all have died here. Xiaoqiu, you did the right thing. But to prevent me from accidentally overexerting myself, you'd better reopen the restriction." If it weren't for the fact that her life was on the line, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't want to experience that sort of dizziness again. But when she thought of what Xiaoqiu had said, that she could draw twice as much power from the bracelet as her own cultivation, Yun Ruoyan was overjoyed. This meant that the higher her cultivation, the more powerful her battle prowess would be. With this bracelet, wouldn't she have a barrier to protect herself? However, she was still poisoned, and her cultivation was limited to 3rd rank. Even with the bracelet's power, her battle prowess was only equivalent to that of a peak 5th-rank blade master. If she gave it her all, she might be able to defeat Yun Ruoyao and Pei Xiao, but against Pei Xiong she would have no choice but to run. Although the Feilai blade was powerful, she knew that it couldn't be used so easily. On the Qinyuan continent, there were far too many vicious and greedy cultivators. Once the Feilai blade was revealed, it would surely attract the attention of all parties. She was just an abandoned daughter of the Yun family, and no matter how many lives she had, she wouldn't be able to afford it. The bracelet's spatial ability was different. Even if she used it, no one would be able to detect it. After thinking this through, Yun Ruoyan calmed herself down and focused on recuperating as soon as possible. She sat cross-legged in the bracelet's pocket dimension, beginning to cultivate a foundational technique that allowed her to absorb spiritual energy from the heavens and the earth. Xiaoqiu said that although it had many high-grade techniques, Yun Ruoyan's foundation was too weak to learn any of them. Currently, the foundational techniques were the most suitable for her. Only after cultivating in the bracelet's pocket dimension for an entire night did Yun Ruoyan feel a little less drained. By the time she opened her eyes, the sky was already bright. You're awake, Sister Ruoyan." Yun Ruoyan first heard Lin Qingshue's voice, and then the other two quickly gathered around. What happened to me? Yun Ruoyan pretended not to know anything as she looked at the three of them in confusion. Sister Ruan, you killed the megalodon single-handedly last night and then fainted. As Lin Qingchen spoke, she reached out and placed her hand on Yun Ruoyan's wrist. Although Lin Qingchen hadn't been discovered to have talent as a pillmaster, she had studied medicine with Lin Zainan for many years, and could be considered one of the most famous physicians in the Li Kingdom. Sister, you're recovering very quickly. Lin Qingchen let out a sigh of relief. Last night when you suddenly fainted, I took your pulse and found that your pulse had stopped for a short period of time. That was a sign of extreme exhaustion, and both Qingxue and I were quite frightened. Lin Qingchen was a little wooden, and unlike Lin Qingxue, who loved to talk and laugh, she had always kept her emotions hidden. For her to appear so frightened, it was clear how bad her condition had been last night. Lin Qingxue, who usually chattered incessantly, was abnormally quiet at this moment, staring at Yun Ruoyan without blinking. What's the matter? My face is oozing pus again. Yun Ruoyan reached out to touch the birthmark on her face. No. Lin Qingxue hurriedly waved her hands, blinking her large eyes. Sister Ruan, can I ask you a question? Yun Ruoyan sighed inwardly. It was finally here, and she didn't know how much longer she'd have to explain her sudden increase in fighting ability. Before Yun Ruoyan could nod, Lin Qingxue impatiently asked, Sister Ruan, how did you suddenly become so frightening last night? It was as if you were possessed by the god of war. Even now, Lin Qingxue could still clearly remember how Yun Ruoyan, who had been lying next to her, had suddenly stood up, as if she had transformed into a completely different person. I won't let anything happen to you. At that moment, Yun Ruoyan's entire body exuded a terrifying strength. There's a secret cultivation technique on the Qinyuan continent that can raise one's cultivation in a short period of time, but it's extremely harmful to the body. Did you use it? Yifeng suddenly asked. Yun Ruoyan hesitated for a moment before quickly denying it. Of course I didn't. That technique would harm both myself and others, and I'm only 13. How could I have cultivated it? There was a technique on the Qinyuan continent that forcibly absorbed another person's cultivation, but it was extremely easy to cause a backlash, and it was so cruel that it was classified as a forbidden technique. Zhou Yifeng looked at Yun Ruoyan's childish face and also felt that it was impossible. Then how did you do it? He continued to ask. Yun Ruoyan knew that she wouldn't be able to escape this question today. Although she didn't want to lie, some secrets could only be buried in her heart. For example, the fact that she had been reborn or that she possessed two treasures. Actually, I don't know either. Yun Ruoyan rubbed her forehead and covered her eyes with her hands, pretending to be distressed. In truth, she was afraid that her eyes would betray her. You don't know either? The three people around her asked at the same time. It's true. Yun Ruoyan suddenly thought of an excellent excuse. I can tell you a secret, one that only grandfather and I know. You must keep it a secret. What secret? The Lin sisters were even more confused. What kind of secret would be kept from even them? You all know that I've been a genius at cultivation since I was young, but as time passed, my talent became weaker and weaker. In the end, I became a cripple. The Lin sisters were naturally aware of this, but this was the first time Zhou Yifeng had heard of it. He couldn't help but frown. Everyone thought that this was a natural trait, and even grandfather couldn't find the reason. But not long ago, the birthmark on my face was accidentally scratched, and I discovered that I'd been poisoned. Yun Ruoyan continued. Grandfather said that I'd been poisoned by a slow-acting poison that would restrict my cultivation and ruin my appearance. He's currently refining an antidote for me, and after eating it a few times I feel much better than before. Even my talent for cultivation is showing signs of returning. As a result, I think that my sudden increase in strength is the result of my cultivation, which has been suppressed for so many years. Yun Ruoyan paused for a moment, waiting for their reaction. Good preparation. Lin Qingchen continued. From a medical point of view, this is indeed a possibility. No wonder Sister Ruan's been getting stronger and stronger recently. So the poison in her body has been cured. Lin Qingxue was already convinced by Yun Ruoyan's words. Who poisoned Sister Ruan? How vicious! We must capture her and tear her to pieces. As Yun Ruoyan lamented that her two sisters were so gullible, Madame Anne's face surfaced in her mind. When she got out of the Imperial secret territory, it was time to settle this score. Chapter 31. Although Yun Ruoyan had woken up and had recovered more than half of her spiritual essence, her body was still a little weak, and her legs would turn to jelly after a few steps. After some discussion, they decided to rest for the day and continue on the second day. Not far away, the saber-toothed tiger's carcass lay quietly on the ground. After Yun Ruoyan had fainted last night, they had all been so worried that none of them had thought to deal with the tiger's treasures. With the help of the Lin sisters, Yun Ruoyan walked over to the tiger's carcass. After a night's time, the saber-toothed tiger's carcass was already a little stiff. Only its two long fangs reflected a cold light under the sun, showing its former glory. The saber-toothed tiger is a mid-rank magical beast, and its entire body is a treasure. Zhou Yifeng carefully touched one of the fangs, his eyes shining. If I were to use its fangs as arrowheads, they would definitely be very hard and sharp. Brother, if you had a sharp enough arrow, the saber-toothed tiger from yesterday definitely wouldn't have been a match for you. Shuolin, who had been tugging on Zhou Yifeng's arm, looked up. If Yun Ruoyu's group had heard this, they would surely have laughed their heads off, but Yun Ruoyan had seen Zhou Yifeng's archery. Yesterday, when dealing with the saber-toothed tiger, Zhou Yifeng's arrows were both fast and accurate. Unfortunately, his arrows weren't sharp enough to pierce through the tiger's tough fur, and could only serve as a distraction. If he had a sharp enough arrow, even if he couldn't kill the tiger, he would at least be able to heavily injure it. Brother Zhou, you're amazing! Lin Qingqian exclaimed, but what she was implying was that not only was Zhou Yifeng's archery amazing, but his cooking was also amazing. It's a pity that only a 5th-rank forge master or above can forge such good materials into a weapon, Zhou Yifeng continued regretfully. There were a total of 4 cultivation professions on the Abyssal Continent: Blade Masters, Forge Masters, Summoners and Pill Masters. Blade Masters didn't require any special talent, as long as they could practice a basic technique and absorb spiritual energy from the heavens and earth into their own. Of the other 3 professions, Forge Masters were the most common, followed by Summoners, and the rarest were Pill Masters. Once a descendant of the family was discovered to have talent in alchemy, he would immediately become the focus of the family's nurturing. Those with mediocre talent could only become Blade Masters, and it was very difficult for them to break through to 7th rank. Only after reaching 7th rank could one become a Pill Master, a Forge Master or a Summoner. Every cultivation profession was further divided into 9 levels. The first 3 levels were the basic levels, which were relatively easy to achieve. The higher levels, the more difficult it would be. Some summoners and apothecaries might never be able to reach level 4 in their entire lives. Forge Masters, on the other hand, were easier to find, so Blade Masters and Forge Masters were the most common occupations on the Qinyuan continent. When it came to the refinement of weapons, the better the materials, the higher the cultivation of the refiner was needed. This was the same principle as alchemy because both of them required fire. The higher the cultivation, the purer the spiritual fire that could be condensed would be, and the sharper and more spiritual energy would be produced. On the other hand, if the refiner's cultivation was not high enough, no matter how good the materials were, it would be a waste. If the weapon refiner's cultivation reached the legendary peak of level 9 and had a set of supreme-grade weapon refiner materials, the combination of the two was very likely to forge a god-grade weapon. For example, this was how Yun Ruoyan had obtained the Feilai blade. Although 5th-rank Forge Masters weren't all that impressive on the Abyssal Continent, to a beastkin brat like Zhou Yifeng, who didn't even have a shred of status, he was undoubtedly someone important. As a result, he could only stare at the 2 fangs dejectedly, thinking that if he could bring one out of the Imperial territory, he'd definitely be able to sell it for a good price. I do know a Forge Master, Yun Ruoyan interrupted Zhou Yifeng's train of thought. He's already at the peak of level 5, so it shouldn't be a problem for him to refine these fangs into arrows. In any case, leave it to me. Yun Ruoyan hated owing others favors, and Zhou Yifeng had helped them out twice. Naturally, she would remember this favor and find an opportunity to repay him. She just hadn't expected the opportunity to come so soon. Really? That's great. Zhou Yifeng didn't hesitate, his already bright eyes growing even brighter. Sister, although you're the sole wife-born daughter of the Yun family, You haven't received much attention in recent years. How did you know a 5th-rank forge master? Lin Qingchen asked. Yun Ruoyan smiled. You've all met this forge master before. He's Pei Zio's father, Pei Yingxiong, the one who accompanied me to the Lins to ask for medicine. Ah, the old man who was ridiculed by grandfather and even used a high-grade alchemy furnace to exchange for medicine? Lin Qingxue interrupted. I don't think he's a magnanimous person. Will he help? If grandfather were to do it, it shouldn't be a problem, Lin Qingchen murmured. But grandfather never asks for help. Lin Zainan and Pei Yingxiong were both 5th-rank cultivators, but even 100 Pei Yingxiangs wouldn't be a match for a single Lin Zainan. Of course I don't need grandfather's permission, Yun Ruoyan smiled. Yun Ruoyan smiled. She turned her head to look at the spear stuck in the ground not far behind her. She said slowly, I just need to wait for him to come beg me again. In the afternoon, they worked together to extract the saber-toothed tiger's 2 fangs, as well as its most precious core. The tiger's core was golden, about the size of a baby's fist, and Lin Qingxue couldn't bear to let go of it. Ah, I thought the beast core of a hound was cute enough, but the saber-toothed tiger's is even cuter. Lin Qingchen took the core and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. Sister Ron, you were the one who killed the saber-toothed tiger, so this core should be your spoils of war. No matter how close the 2 sisters were to Yun Ruoyan, they were still from different families, and most of the spoils of war would belong to their respective families. If Yun Ruoyan were to obtain this core for the Yun family, it would surely raise her status within the family. Lin Qingxue's carefree personality hadn't thought of this, but she immediately understood her sister's words. That's right, Sister Run, this should be yours. Yun Ruoyan, however, didn't take it. Instead she pushed it away. If not for you guys protecting me yesterday, I'd probably have become food for the saber-toothed tiger, so this core belongs to everyone including Zhou Yifeng. Yun Ruoyan glanced at Zhou Yifeng. Zhou Yifeng had already received Yun Ruoyan's promise to forge a weapon for him. Given that she was a 5th-rank forge master and had top-grade materials, the weapon she forged would at least be mid-grade. He was already quite satisfied with this, but he hadn't expected Yun Ruoyan to still want to share a portion of the beast core with him. I'll be fine with these 2 fangs, but I don't want the beast core, Zhou Yifeng replied. You clearly have a share, and I've already said that we sisters won't take advantage of you. Yun Ruoyan's attitude was very resolute. From the start she hadn't intended to let Zhou Yifeng travel with them. First, she didn't know how strong he was, and second, he had a weak sister with him. She was afraid that he'd be a burden. Second, she didn't know him well, and she was afraid that they wouldn't be able to coordinate well in battle. But after 2 days of interaction, Yun Ruoyan had already accepted him as a member of her team. Since he was part of her team, she naturally couldn't be stingy. In her past life, it was precisely because she didn't know how to win the hearts of others that she'd ended up all alone, with no one to collect her corpse. Listen to me, it's settled. Yun Ruoyan took the beast core and stuffed it into Lin Qingchen's pouch. Lin Qingchen's pouch had its own secrets, and for convenience's sake, everyone agreed to leave all the treasures they'd obtained with her, and they'd split them evenly once they got out. Zhou Yifeng didn't refuse, and his face remained expressionless. However, his heart wasn't at peace. As a beastkin, this was the first time he'd been treated as an equal. The spiritual energy within the Huang family's territory was much denser than outside. After dealing with these matters, the group began to meditate and cultivate. As soon as Yun Ruoyan sat down, she sent her mental energy into the pocket dimension. The spiritual energy within the pocket dimension was much denser than in the territory itself. After a full day and 2 nights of rest, coupled with Lin Qingchen's decoction, Yun Ruoyan was more or less recovered by the next morning. This was the 3rd day since they'd entered the territory, and there were still 7 days left until the end of the trial. If they couldn't get out of the mystic realm by then, they'd have to wait 3 years to enter Kongming Academy. 3 years of waiting wasn't much to the Lin sisters, but Yun Ruoyan desperately wanted to leave the Yun family, and the only way she could do that was to enter Kongming Academy. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel a little anxious, but she didn't show it so as not to disturb the others. Brother Zhou, won't it be too tiring for you to carry Hu Ya and Lin on your back? Do you want me to carry you for a while? Lin Qingxue's voice rang out eagerly. She'd been chattering away with Zhou Yifeng the entire morning. Even though Zhou Yifeng wouldn't necessarily respond to her 10 times, It didn't dampen her enthusiasm in the slightest. Lin Qingchen turned back to look at her sister, frowning slightly. Yun Ruoyan smiled and shook her head. In her previous life she'd thought her sister to be simple-minded and silly. But now she found Lin Qingchen's bright, innocent and cute personality to be quite a rarity, and she quite liked it. "I don't want you to carry me, brother." Zhuo Lin didn't seem to appreciate Lin Qingchen's enthusiasm. "No need, I'm used to carrying you." Zhuo Yifeng also refused. On each of his shoulders hung a tusk half the height of a grown man, and on his back hung Zhuo Lin. Even as he walked, his face didn't flush and he didn't even pant. Even Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but marvel at how terrifyingly strong beastkin bodies were. "Hey, Zhuo Lin." Lin Qingchen looked at Zhuo Lin, who turned her head to the side. "You're at least 10 years old, aren't you? Why do you need someone to carry you? What does it have to do with you that I want my brother to carry me?" Zhuo Lin shouted angrily. Usually she didn't like to talk much unless there was an emergency. But Lin Qingchen just had the ability to make her angry. "Lin, I'm telling you, even though we're girls, we can't rely on each other for everything. Brother, there's a herd of beasts nearby," Zhuo Lin suddenly whispered into Zhuo Yifeng's ear. "Everyone be careful. There's a herd of beasts nearby." Zhuo Yifeng immediately stopped and looked around cautiously. Chapter 32. At Zhuo Yifeng's warning, all of them held their breaths. Only then did they realize that their surroundings had become extremely quiet, as if even the incessant wind had disappeared. This was a clear sign that a powerful magical beast was about to appear. "Qiu, Yun Ruoyan called out in her mind. "Can you sense what kind of beast horde it is?" Based on the aura, it's not a particularly powerful creature, but there's a large number of them. It is. Qiu couldn't immediately determine what kind of beast it was. "What a strong fishy smell." "Snakes. Snakes." Zhuo Lin's voice trembled. Yun Ruoyan listened carefully. Indeed, there was a rustling sound coming from the west, the sound of the snakes slithering against something. "The snakes are coming from the west and they're heading east. Let's retreat to the south," Yun Ruoyan commanded decisively. They followed her footsteps into the southern forest, but before they could take more than a few steps, they heard a female scream from behind them. That voice belonged to none other than Yi Qianying. Yun Ruoyan's heart skipped a beat. They'd stopped at the spot where they had killed the saber-toothed tiger for a day and 2 nights. According to what Paizio had said, if they hadn't found the exit, they would have circled back to where they'd started, but they hadn't. Yun Ruoyan had always thought that they had found a way out of the territory, but she hadn't expected to run into them here. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road and they just wouldn't go away. So many snakes. "Help!" Yi Qianying cried out in alarm. "There's someone in the south. Let's follow them." Yun Ruoyao called out to the group before following Yun Ruoyan's group into the southern forest. Her speed was so fast that it didn't take long for her to catch up to Yun Ruoyan's group. "Why are you all everywhere? You cowards!" Lin Qingxia turned around and cursed as she ran. Yun Ruoyu wanted to retort, but her face was pale, and it was clear that she'd suffered quite a fright. Behind them, a scene that would make one's hair stand on end was slowly unfolding. The green snakes, big and small, were densely packed as they spread towards them. It was simply impossible to estimate the number of snakes. The strange fishy smell in the air grew stronger and stronger. Paizio held his sword in one hand and Yi Qianying in the other, running at the back. Yi Qianying suddenly tripped, causing Paizio to stumble as well. With this, the two of them were instantly surrounded by the swarm of snakes. Paizio let go of Yi Qianying's hand and pulled out a dagger from his waist. He held his sword in his other hand and used both of his hands to protect himself from any danger. Countless small snakes were cut into 2 by his sword, and for a moment, a rain of snakes flew everywhere. Yi Qianying crouched behind him, her face alternating between green and white. The few people who were running in front were quickly caught up by the snakes. They had no choice but to stop and draw their weapons to kill the snakes. "There's no way." Lin Qingxia's. "There," Lin Qingxia said. "Ruan's Yun said, I, Yun, and Yifeng, the Lin, Yun," and ran. When Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng arrived in front of the Lin sisters, they were surprised to find that wherever Zhuo Yifeng went, the snakes all retreated. As if they'd received some sort of order, or perhaps they'd met their natural predator, they all turned to surround someone else. Yun Ruoyan was puzzled. It's the fang of a saber-toothed tiger. Qiuqiu reminded her in her mind. The saber-toothed tiger is a mid-rank magical beast, and this maze forest should be its territory. The snakes must have smelled the saber-toothed tiger's fang and treated Zhou Yifeng as their lord, so they're afraid. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly called for everyone to get closer to Zhou Yifeng. Indeed, the snakes surrounding them stopped a foot away from Zhou Yifeng. Why aren't the snakes biting them but us? Yun Ruoyu shouted as she killed the snakes. They must have some sort of treasure that can repel the snakes, Yi Qianying said, her voice trembling. Whatever the reason, let's learn from Sister Ruoyan, Yun Ruoyao said. The others immediately understood what she meant. Yesterday when they'd faced the saber-toothed tiger, Yun Ruoyan had wanted to use them as scapegoats. Why not give them a taste of their own medicine today? They began to approach Yun Ruoyan's group in unison. Those shameless cowards. They're coming our way. What should we do? Lin Qingxue cursed. Yun Ruoyan hated every single one of them, but she remembered that Pei Zio was very familiar with the territory, and if they wanted to find the exit they'd have to rely on him. Forget it, let's just save their lives. Yun Ruoyan said coolly. Although the Lin sisters also disliked them and felt that their escape yesterday was shameless, they couldn't just stand by and watch them die, so they didn't object. Pei Zio, Yun Ruoyao, and the others quickly retreated to within 10 feet of Zhou Yifeng, and the snakes surrounded them in a 10-foot radius. Hey, we thought you'd left long ago, but we didn't expect to see you here. Lin Qingxue didn't miss the opportunity to taunt Yun Ruoyu. Yun Ruoyu gritted her teeth, still recovering from her fright. Sister Ruan, I'm so glad you're all right. The one who spoke was Yi Qianying. Her pretty face was a little pale from the shock, and her large eyes were glistening from her tears. Her affectionate greeting to Yun Ruoyan was truly bewitching. Thank you for your concern. Are you disappointed that we didn't die? Lin Qingchen immediately choked her back. Yi Qianying shut her mouth awkwardly. Sister Ruoyan, we left yesterday to preserve our family's strength. I hope you can understand, Yun Ruoyao said matter-of-factly, not the slightest bit guilty. When she had seen Yun Ruoyan and the others, she had been surprised that they were still alive. In fact, she had felt a little guilty. Even if Yun Lan wouldn't blame them, it wouldn't be a good thing to abandon her sisters and flee. However, Yun Ruoyao's mental fortitude was still quite good. She quickly suppressed her guilt and made her high-sounding excuse sound even more convincing. Yun Ruoyan didn't want to pay attention to her, so she directly ignored her words. She frowned as she looked at the snakes surrounding them, neither attacking nor leaving. We can't just be surrounded like this. We have to think of a way to escape, she couldn't help but say. Pei Zio didn't seem to notice the disgust in the Lin sisters' eyes as he walked straight to Yun Ruoyan's side. Yi Qianying followed behind him like a shadow, and Yun Ruoyan felt her eyes hurt just looking at the two of them, so she turned her head to the side. We've actually found the exit to the mystic realm just now. Pei Zio's words attracted Yun Ruoyan's attention. What did you just say? You've already found the exit to the mystic realm? Sister Ruoyan, don't believe him. If they really found the exit, why aren't they leaving? Could it be that they're worried about us and that's why they've come back? Lin Qingxue looked at Pei Zio disdainfully. Although he looked like a decent person, he was actually a coward who was afraid of death. Her family's core foundation pill had been wasted on him. Brother Zio isn't lying. We really did find the exit, Yi Qianying hurriedly explained. We were just about to go out when we accidentally touched a restriction and angered the snake horde. That's why we were chased here. Really? Lin Qingxue's tone was still doubtful. You make it sound as if it's the truth. Forget it, there's nothing we can do even if they don't believe us. Yun Ruoyu had only just recovered from her injuries. Although she'd consumed a life quintessence pill, she still wasn't confident in her abilities. And you call us cowards? You don't even dare to believe the truth, so you don't seem to have much courage. There's no reason for us to lie to you. Everyone wants to leave this place as soon as possible, Yun Ruoyao explained. All right, lead the way, Yun Ruoyan said decisively. Yun Ruoyu and Yun Ruoyao glanced at each other before leading the way. Yun Ruoyan glanced at the Lin sisters and Zhou Yifeng, motioning for them to follow. As they moved, the snake horde followed, not falling behind in the slightest. Pei Zhou walked behind Yun Ruoyan, glancing at her from time to time. From his observations of Yun Ruoyan over the past few days, he was surprised to find that she had changed. She had become smarter, more agile and more decisive. These qualities deeply attracted him. His gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan's straight back. Her black hair was neatly tied into a ponytail, revealing her fair, slender neck. Her red robes accentuated her slender figure, accentuated by her slender figure. If one were to look at her from behind, they would think that she was a rare beauty. It was a pity that her face was ruined. Pei Zhou sighed in his heart. Ouch. Qianying tripped over something. Coincidentally, Pei Zhou was distracted and didn't have time to catch her. She fell directly onto Yun Ruoyu, who was walking in front of her. You can't even walk properly and yet you're here for the trial? Are you here to die? Yun Ruoyu shook her off in disgust. I'm sorry. Qianying apologized profusely. Pei Zhou frowned as well. He couldn't figure out why his father would recommend Qianying. Shouldn't such a delicate girl be raised in the backyard? This sort of place was more suitable for a strong girl like Yun Ruoyan. He couldn't help but think of a way to marry these two girls, one to accompany him in his cultivation, and the other to be kept in the backyard. She would be able to comfort him when he was tired from his cultivation. As he thought of this, Pei Zhou couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. We're here. This is the place. Yun Ruoyu and Yun Ruoyao stopped in front of a cave-like place. We'll be able to leave the mystic realm from here. Pei Zhou walked to the entrance of the cave and pointed inside. By this time, the snake horde had retreated even further away and countless pairs of green eyes were staring at them. You two go first, Yun Ruoyan said decisively, glancing at Pei Zhou and Yun Ruoyao. Of course we'll go first. Yun Ruoyu walked into the cave. Yun Ruoyao, Qianying and Pei Zhou followed closely behind. At the entrance, Pei Zhou turned back to look at Yun Ruoyan, only to find her staring back at him coldly. Although she sensed that his gaze was a little strange, she didn't take it to heart. The cave was very deep, and after walking for about 15 minutes, they still hadn't seen the exit. Yun Ruoyan asked, and the answer she received was that they were almost there. Yun Ruoyao and the others' footsteps also became faster and faster. Yun Ruoyan began to feel that something was wrong. Just as she was considering whether or not to turn back, she suddenly realized that there was a fork in the road ahead, and Yun Ruoyao and the others had suddenly disappeared. Chapter 33. Damn it! Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but curse. The inside of the cave was winding, and the deeper one went, the darker it became. She had been very careful to follow Pei Zhou, who was walking at the back. She didn't expect to see a fork after a turn. What was even more unexpected was that Pei Zhou's figure had only left her line of sight for a short moment when he turned the corner. By the time she caught up with him, there was no one in front of the fork in the road. Sister Ruoyan, why aren't you walking? Lin Qingxue asked. Yun Ruoyan silently turned her body to the side, and Lin Qingxue stared at the two dark caves in front of her, dumbfounded. Where are they? Which cave did they enter? I don't know. I got dumped. What? Dumped? Lin Qingxue cried out. These people are too evil. We saved them, but they're biting the hand that feeds them. Don't let me see them again. Otherwise I'll teach them a lesson. Because Yun Ruoyan was in a hurry to get out of the maze, she took a risk and chose to trust Yun Ruoyao and the others. Although she had been very careful along the way, she hadn't expected to fall into Yun Ruoyao's trap in the end. I underestimated those people. Yun Ruoyan slowly clenched her fists. She had overestimated herself, thinking that even if the other party were to play any tricks, she would be able to neutralize them. Sure enough, it was impossible to guard against people who wanted to harm him. Lin Qingchen, who was walking in the middle, and Zhou Yifeng, who was bringing up the rear, were also furious. Based on how familiar those fellows are with this place, I can tell that they must have already explored this place thoroughly. What's their purpose in luring us here? Lin Qingchen asked. It can't be anything good. Lin Qingxue was very sure of her judgment. Let's not go any further. Let's turn back now. No. Zhou Yifeng rejected Lin Qingxue's suggestion. Lin said that there's a strong demonic snake aura behind us. Those snakes are still guarding the entrance of the cave. The saber-toothed tiger aura on my body can only confuse them for a moment. When they react, they will definitely attack us again. Not only that. Zhuolin whispered from Zhou Yifeng's back. I can feel their restlessness. They seem to have reacted. Zhuolin words made everyone even more nervous. There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. Then we can only move forward now. There are 2 entrances here and Yun Ruiyao must have entered one of them. In that case we still have a 50% chance of escaping. But which one should we go to? Everyone's gaze landed on Yun Ruiyao once more. If there was only one path in front of him, he would have to brace himself and take it no matter how dangerous it was. However, this was a damn multiple-choice question. On one side was the exit and on the other side was the unknown danger. How should he choose? Yun Ruiyao didn't know what to do. Chirp chirp. She asked Qiuqiu for help in her mind. Can you feel which of these 2 caves is the exit and which one is dangerous? I'm sorry, master. Qiuqiu's voice sounded rather awkward. I can't tell either, but you have to make a decision quickly because those demonic snakes are already close. The demonic snake's aura is approaching, Zhuolin warned. Ruiyao, make your choice. We're all willing to follow you. Lin Qingqian's voice was calm. If we choose the right path, of course we'll be able to get out. But if we choose the wrong path, we'll definitely be able to overcome the danger as long as we work together. That's right, Ruiyao. You were even able to defeat such a powerful saber-toothed tiger, so there's nothing for me to be afraid of. Yun Ruiyao turned back to look at her companions. 3 people, 3 pairs of bright eyes. No for pairs. Zhuolin peeked out from Zhou Yifeng's shoulder and looked at Yun Ruiyao quietly. Yun Ruiyao slowly relaxed her clenched fists, a smile on her face. In her past life, she had alienated the people who truly loved her and given her heart to a man who was worse than a beast. In the end, she had died alone, filled with hatred. In this life, when she faced danger once more, she had friends and family who trusted her. Yun Ruiyao's anxiety suddenly calmed down. She turned her head away and pointed at the cave on the left. We'll take this one. Yes, the people behind her replied in unison. I'll say it again. Yun Ruiyao turned back once more, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. I won't let anything happen to you. By this time Yun Ruiyao, Yun Ruoyu, Yi Qianying and Pei Ziyou had already walked out of the cave. Look, there's someone over there. Yun Ruiyao pointed at a small river not far away, where a few people were cooking over a fire. Night had fallen once more. It's Lu Xing and Wang Kuang. Pei Ziyou's expression brightened. I recognize them. They're scions from the Yu Kingdom, and half a month ago they even asked my father to train their weapons. Looks like we've already walked out of the maze. Pei Ziyou turned back to look at the cave behind him with a complicated expression. Before entering the territory, Pei Yingxiong had specifically told him how to find the exit just in case. He hadn't said anything because he wanted to find an opportunity to get close to Yun Ruiyao. Unfortunately, that woman was far too ignorant. No matter how much he tried to lower himself, she would always ignore him. As a result, when they were surrounded by the saber-toothed tigers, he only hesitated for a moment before running away with Yun Ruiyao and the others, quickly finding the exit. But halfway through the cave he suddenly realized that if Yun Ruiyao and the others were lucky enough not to die, they would definitely spread the news once they left the territory. Even if they weren't punished by their families, they would become a laughing stock among their peers, and they would probably never be able to raise their heads again. Coincidentally, Yun Ruiyao had also thought of this possibility. As a result, they decided to head back. It would be best if they were dead, but if not, they would devise a plan to get rid of them. There was a secret to the exit of the maze that most people didn't know about, so many people might not be able to leave even if they found the exit. As a result, he had come up with this plan to lure them into the trap. He had been a little hesitant at first, but when he tried to sound them out, he received unanimous approval. It looks like the heavens really don't want you around, Yun Ruiyao. If only you'd spoken a little more to me, I might have seen some hope, and you wouldn't have ended up like this. Pei Ziyou sighed internally. Yi Qianying looked at his expression and thought that he was worried. Brother Ziyou, don't worry. Yi Qianying tugged on Pei Ziyou's hand. They won't have a chance to harm your reputation. Pei Ziyou looked at Yi Qianying, who was as gentle as water in front of him. He grunted lightly, but his hand silently rested on her waist. But they still have a 50% chance of making it out alive, Yun Ruoyu protested. Yi Qianying smiled faintly, a cold glint in her eyes. Even if they chose the right path, the snakes hiding in the cave wouldn't let them go. This was because Yi Qianying had been tested as a summoner at a young age, and one of the reasons why the Yun family had always valued her so highly. However, she was slow and lazy when it came to cultivation. She had been a 4th-rank blade master for 2 whole years, so she hadn't been able to begin training as a summoner. However, with her talent and unique perception, she was able to concoct powders that could attract all sorts of magical beasts. At the time, the saber-toothed tiger had only attacked Yun Ruoyan because she had sprinkled this powder on Yun Ruoyan's body. And now, when she had pretended to fall, she had sprinkled the same powder on Lin Qingshue's body. The image of Lin Qingshue's disgusted expression flashed through Yi Qianying's mind, and she felt incredibly pleased. Don't blame me for being heartless. Who told you to be so ugly and try to steal Brother Zio from me? You have to die. By this time, Yun Ruoyan's group had already reached the depths of the cave. What they didn't know was that they were less than halfway to the exit of the maze realm. Originally, there was still some light in the cave, but as time passed, it grew darker and darker until it was pitch black. Lin Qingshan took out a beast core from her pouch and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. The golden-yellow saber-toothed tiger core gave off a faint white glow, barely illuminating the path ahead. The others all held the beast cores of fiery-maned hounds in their hands. Compared to the saber-toothed tigers, the glow was slightly weaker, but it was still better than nothing. How much longer do we have to walk? Is this a bottomless pit? Lin Qingxue murmured, shivering involuntarily. Brother, an even quieter voice called out from Zhou Yifeng's back. What's the matter, Lin? Zhou Yifeng turned to look at his sister. Zhou Lin shook her head, and Zhou Yifeng turned back and continued walking, not paying much attention to her. Zhou Lin frowned slightly. She could smell the faint odor of a demonic snake, but when she tried to identify it, the odor had disappeared. Her nose shouldn't be acting up, so what was going on? While Zhou Lin was still puzzled, Lin Qingxue suddenly felt her feet slip. She let out a low cry. Did I step on something? Everyone stopped in their tracks. She held the saber-toothed tiger core in her hand and leaned over to take a look. Lying on the ground was a dark green snake only as thick as a finger, its head flattened by Lin Qingshue's stomp. Oh, it's just a little snake. That scared me. Lin Qingxue patted her chest and let out a sigh of relief. This small interlude didn't attract the group's attention, and they continued walking forward. But after a few steps, Lin Qingxue screamed again. As she screamed, she flung an object at Yun Ruoyan, who was walking in front of her. Yun Ruoyan unsheathed her sword and sliced the snake in two. Why are these things always staring at me? Lin Qingxue was a little exasperated. Yun Ruoyan also found it a little strange. She held the beast core in her hand and shone it around her. Suddenly, she discovered that there were many strange stones embedded in the walls of the cave. She couldn't help but move her head closer to take a closer look. As she did, all the hair on her body stood on end. The densely packed round pebbles were clearly demon snake eggs. Oh no! Yun Ruoyan screamed. Just then, the entire cave began emitting a sound similar to that of an egg breaking. Crack, 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 crack. Incessant. What's wrong? What's going on? Everyone was confused by the sudden turn of events. Chapter 34. This is a nest of snakes. Zhou Lin's voice trembled. Mistress, run. At the same time, Qiuqiu's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. Everyone run. The walls are full of snake eggs, so be careful not to touch them. Yun Ruoyan shouted as she ran forward. But it was too late. Countless little snakes drilled their emerald green heads out of the eggs on the stone wall. Even above their heads, a rain of snakes began to fall. The small snakes which had just hatched were still covered in slime. As they fell, a putrid stench filled the entire cave. Yun Ruoyan and the others ran as fast as they could, but the small snakes seemed to be under someone's command. They slithered along the walls and stopped in front of them. In front of him, they were densely packed, forming a solid wall of snakes. Seeing that the path ahead was blocked by the wall of snakes, the group could only run backward. After much difficulty, they reached the fork in the road, but the path behind them was also blocked by snakes. Now all that was left was the tunnel on the right. Without any hesitation, the group turned around and ran in. This tunnel didn't have any snake eggs, and it seemed to be much more spacious than the other one. However, the snakes behind them continued to chase after them like a flood. After running for some time, Yun Ruoyan felt as if her internal organs were aching from the intense running. After all, she had just battled the saber-toothed tiger 2 days ago, and her body hadn't fully recovered yet. Finally, a faint light appeared in front of them. We're at the exit. We're finally at the exit. Lin Qingxue had long since run to the front of the group, and she was almost exhausted. Because of the powder that Yi Qianying had sprinkled on her to attract snakes, the snakes became even more frenzied. Sometimes they would leap over the others and pounce on her. As a result, Lin Qingxue, who had been following Yun Ruoyan the entire time, ran to the front of the group. Lin Qingxue ran out of the tunnel in a huff and collapsed on the ground. Her entire body felt weak and she kept muttering, "I can't run anymore, I can't run anymore. Even if I'm eaten by snakes, I won't run." Although she said this when she felt something on her shoulder, she still bounced up and prepared to continue running. "Don't run, it's fine now." Yun Ruoyan's voice rang out from behind her. Only then did she dare to look back. The entrance of the cave that they had just escaped from was densely packed with green demonic snakes. Under the moonlight they intertwined with each other. Their tiny scales rubbed against each other and made a hair-raising sound. They kept sticking out their red tongues, which reminded people of some kind of disgusting bloodworms. But strangely enough, these terrifying demonic snakes that seemed capable of destroying everything stopped at the entrance of the cave. It was as if they were under some sort of restriction and didn't dare to take a single step out of the cave. "Why aren't the snakes chasing us anymore?" Lin Qingchen asked breathlessly as she sat on the ground. "Who cares? Anyway, I'm safe now." "How are the two of you? Are you hurt?" Yun Ruoyan asked the two girls. Zhuo Yifeng had already put Zhuo Lin down. He wasn't panting like the others, but he didn't look too good. "Oh." Zhuo Yifeng shook his head. "I just lost a tiger's fang." His usually expressionless face revealed a hint of pain. As he ran, he had to protect his sister. Although he felt the fang fall from his body, he didn't have the time to pick it up. That was a treasure from a mid-rank magical beast, and it could be used to forge at least 20 mid-rank arrowheads. How could he not be heartbroken? "Brother Zhui, it's fine. Under those circumstances, your life was more important." Lin Qingxue comforted him. "Brother, will have more treasures in the future. Our lives are more important." Zhuo Lin glanced at Lin Qingxue. For once, the two of them, who had always been at odds with each other, agreed. "Are we out of the mystic realm?" Lin Qingchen asked as she surveyed her surroundings. They were in a place that resembled a valley. In the night, the chirping of insects and the gentle breeze gave them a sense of contentment. "Whether it's the mystic realm or the mystic realm, I want to have a good sleep first," Lin Qingxue cried out. Her words echoed everyone's thoughts. The group found a place, started a fire and rested. It was the beginning of summer and even the nights weren't cold. However, for safety's sake they still started a fire. Zhuo Yifeng, who had the best physique among them, kept watch and the others quickly fell asleep. The night passed peacefully, and the group felt as if the sun had risen as soon as they closed their eyes. Yun Ruoyan woke up to a strong aroma. When she opened her eyes, she saw Zhuo Yifeng busying himself in front of the fire. "Didn't you sleep all night?" Yun Ruoyan walked up to Zhuo Yifeng's side, a little embarrassed. Last night they had agreed that Zhuo Yifeng would keep watch for the first half of the night, and she would keep watch for the second half. But she really was too tired. She hadn't slept so soundly in both her previous and current lives. "Why didn't you wake me up?" Zhuo Yifeng was busy turning the meat in his hands. Without turning his head, he replied, "Don't worry, I can go a few days without sleep." Looking at his serious profile, Yun Ruoyan found that not only were his eyes bright, but even his eyelashes were so long that they were slightly curled up, casting a line of shadows under the morning sun. It was quite a sight to behold. "All right." Zhuo Yifeng took the meat from the fire and turned around to meet Yun Ruoyan's large eyes. He couldn't help but freeze. Yun Ruoyan was looking at Zhuo Yifeng from the side, and this angle just happened to hide the birthmark on her right cheek, accentuating her snow-white skin with her red color. In that instant, in Zhuo Yifeng's eyes, Yun Ruoyan seemed to have turned into a completely different person. A beautiful, pure and untainted girl. Yun Ruoyan didn't think much of Zhuo Yifeng's dazed expression. She smiled faintly and took the meat from his hands. "What's this? Is it a chicken or a big bird? She asked, a relaxed smile on her face. It smells so good. Lin Qingshue's voice rang out from behind them. The two of them turned around to see that Lin Qingxue had appeared behind them at some point, and because they were so relaxed they didn't even notice. Sister Ruan, Brother Zhou, good morning. Lin Qingxue greeted them with a bright smile. Good morning, you're awake. Here. Yun Ruoyan handed the meat in her hands to Lin Qingxue, her face still smiling but her heart skipped a beat. Why had her guard been so low lately? When she'd first been reborn, Yun Ruoyan had been like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. She didn't dare trust anyone and she was constantly on guard. There was a period when she slept with one eye open and the other closed, and when she ate she had to secretly test her food with a silver needle before she dared to eat. However, ever since he entered the Arcana realm his vigilance had somehow dropped. Here, there's more here. Zhou Yifeng handed her yet another piece of meat. Yun Ruoyan took it and ate as she reflected on her actions. When she'd first been reborn she'd been isolated and helpless. Now that she had friends she could trust, she'd unknowingly let down her guard. Wasn't this also a form of dependence? Once this habit of relaxation became a habit, what would she do when she found herself isolated and helpless again? Sister Ruan, you've eaten 2 portions. Qingqin's going to starve. Lin Qingxue suddenly exclaimed. Only then did Yun Ruoyan snap out of her daze. She looked down at the roasted chicken in her hands and all that was left was a skeleton. She'd eaten such a large roasted chicken all by herself. I'm already full after eating half of it. Sister Ruan, how can you eat so much when you're so skinny? Lin Qingshue's slightly round face was full of surprise. How do you maintain such a good figure? Burp. Yun Ruoyan opened her mouth and burped loudly. Ha ha. Lin Qingxue laughed out loud. Sister Ruan, you're too cute, ha ha. Burp. As if responding to Lin Qingshue's mockery, Yun Ruoyan burped again. Ha ha. Lin Qingxue couldn't even stand up straight from her laughter. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, kept burping, her face turning from white to red, then back to white again. Oh my god. Was the cold and aloof image she'd worked so hard to establish ever since her rebirth going to crumble just like that? No, she had to hold on. Burp. Zhou Yifeng wasn't as expressionless as Lin Qingxue. His face was still as expressionless as ever, but his beastkin's bright eyes were filled with mirth. For the rest of the day Lin Qingshue's mouth didn't stop. First, when Lin Qingchen woke up she imitated the scene vividly for her. Then during mealtime she repeated the scene in front of everyone. Even Zhuo Lin was amused by her. I thought I was the only glutton, but it turns out that Sister Ruoyan is even more gluttonous than I am. You've been burping all day. Burp. Lin Qingxue once again imitated her perfectly. In front of this naive sister Yun Ruoyan couldn't lose her temper. All she could do was lower her head and pretend as if nothing had happened. It looked like she had to think of a way to win over this little sister of hers. Otherwise, as long as Lin Qingxue was around, her cold and aloof image would surely crumble from the imperial territory to the capital. Fortunately, her burping had gotten better by the evening, or even she herself wouldn't have been able to take it. In the morning they had discovered a path in the valley, the only path. They had been walking along this path for an entire day, and although they hadn't encountered any powerful magical beasts, they did find quite a few precious herbs. For example, 100 herb heads and rings of sleep were mid-grade ingredients that could be used to make ointments for external injuries. Stargrass and mulch mushrooms were high-grade ingredients that could be used to make pills that could heal internal injuries. Other mid-grade and low-grade herbs could be found all over the place, as if they could see a small patch of herbs that would be worth hundreds of taels of gold in the capital every few steps. Yun Ruoyan had taken advantage of the moment when no one was paying attention to her to store quite a few herbs in her pocket dimension. Sister Ruoyan. Lin Qingchen walked up to Yun Ruoyan's side and whispered, "Why are there so many spiritual herbs here? Did you sense something?" Yun Ruoyan went straight to the point. Usually, places where spiritual herbs grow are the center of a region's spiritual energy. Do you think we've already reached the center of the imperial territory? Lin Qingchen revealed her conjecture. She had been studying medicine by Lin Zainan's side for quite some time, and she was quite knowledgeable about the matter. Actually, this question had also surfaced in Yun Ruoyan's mind. Had they accidentally stumbled into the heart of the imperial territory? The imperial territory was a ring-shaped area, and the spiritual energy was the weakest on the periphery, as were the spiritual herbs and beasts. The deeper they went, the denser the spiritual energy became, and the more spiritual herbs and beasts there were, naturally of higher quality. Based on the current situation, they had indeed entered the center of the territory. But why are there only spiritual herbs here and no beasts? Lin Qingqian asked. Qiu, mistress. Brother. Qiu and Zhou Lin cried out at the same time. There were beasts in front of them. Chapter 35. Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingqian's guess was correct. Not only had they exited the mystic realm, but they had also stumbled into the heart of the imperial territory, the Thousand Herb Valley. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly led everyone back, hoping to avoid the magical beasts in front of them. However, before they could leave the valley, Zhou Lin and Qiu began to sound the alarm again. There were also magical beasts behind. Can you tell what rank the beast is? Can we deal with it? Yun Ruoyan asked Qiu mentally. After a few battles with magical beasts, Yun Ruoyan was quite confident in her team's abilities. As long as it wasn't a beast as powerful as the saber-toothed tiger, they would still stand a chance. However, before Qiu could answer him, Zhou Lin started crying in fear. Big brother, run. There are so many magical beasts. Is it a herd of beasts? Zhou Yifeng turned to ask his sister. Zhou Lin's face was pale as she nodded repeatedly. At this moment, the sound of stampeding beasts could be heard from both the front and the back. The sound of stampeding was getting louder and louder, accompanied by smoke and dust. One must know that in early summer, this valley was lush with plants and the ground was not dry. If it wasn't for the huge commotion, there wouldn't have been any smoke rising. After escaping the pincer attack of the demon snakes, they encountered another pincer attack of the demon beasts in just 1.5 nights. It was impossible for them not to panic. Even Lin Qingqian, who was naturally calm and composed, was in a state of panic. The usually expressionless Zhou Yifeng's face once again showed signs of panic. As for Zhou Lin and Lin Qingxia, there was no need to even mention them. What to do? Lin Qingxia had already unsheathed her sword. Her eyes flickered between the smoke in front of her and the movements behind her. Hurry up and think of something. I don't want to be bitten to death by a magical snake, and I don't want to be trampled to death by a herd of beasts. Compared to the others, Yun Ruoyan was much calmer. After all, she had been reborn and was much older than these youths. In addition, she had experienced pain, despair and death, so her heart was tempered to become stronger. Yun Ruoyan might not have been aware of these qualities, but whenever she encountered an emergency, she would always be able to face it with a clear mind. Yun Ruoyan's pair of eyes scanned the surroundings spiritedly. The width of the path in this valley was about the same as the streets in the imperial city, and it could probably accommodate 2 carriages at the same time. From this, it could be inferred that smaller magical beasts could pass through 4 or 5 at the same time, while larger ones like the saber-toothed tiger could only pass through 2. In that case, it could be deduced that it was impossible for the magical beasts in front and behind them to pass by each other peacefully. Magical beasts were prideful animals. As the saying goes, when 2 people meet on a narrow path, they will clash behind closed doors. Yun Ruoyan's gaze landed on the cliffs on both sides of the path. The cliffs were quite steep, almost perpendicular to the ground. There were some jagged rocks on it as well as some unknown wild plants. Climb up. Yun Ruoyan shouted, decisively climbing up the cliff. The sound of the stampede of beasts could already be heard by their ears, and the crowd couldn't help but follow Yun Ruoyan. Just as they climbed up more than 20 meters, their footsteps were as fast as lightning. Crackle. Bang bang bang. Dong dong dong. All sorts of sounds were accompanied by a cloud of dust, almost drowning Yun Ruoyan's group. Yun Ruoyan stepped on a protruding rock on the cliff, her hands clinging to a crooked tree as she twisted her upper body to look down. She could see thousands of magical beasts moving on their backs, each with a different kind of horn. Because there were so many of them and because the path in the valley was so narrow, there were occasional stampedes, as well as the pained cries of beasts with broken horns. The group couldn't help but be stunned by the scene in front of them. They had grown up in the capital and they had never seen so many magical beasts before. There weren't that many beasts outside the imperial territory, at least not within the borders of the Li Kingdom. Even the scions of the larger families who practiced fighting with magical beasts would do so in the training grounds of their family academies, where their instructors would release captured or injured magical beasts. And such opportunities weren't often available. After all, there weren't that many magical beasts, and capturing them was even more difficult. Qiu Qiu. Qiu chirped excitedly in Yun Ruoyan's mind. Mistress, these are all herbivorous magical beasts. If you encounter them when they're not running, as long as you don't agitate them, they won't be in any danger. Look, those are long-horned goats, and there's also a flaming horse. Following Qiu's instructions, Yun Ruoyan could see that among the beasts below were those with long horns that looked somewhat like goats, but much larger in size. These were the long-horned goats. The flaming horses were at the very front of the pack. They looked no different from regular horses, except that their manes were fiery red. When they gathered together, they looked like clusters of flames, which was why they were called flaming horses. There was a magical beast record of the 4 empires on the Qinyuan continent, which recorded tens of thousands of magical beasts, ranging from small ones like the medicinal rabbit to mythical beasts that Yun Ruoyan and the others had never seen before. However, this record had always been kept in Kongming Academy's Jade Palace, and most people had never had the chance to see it. There were only a few incomplete copies on the market. Bang, 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 bang. In front of them, there was a sudden deafening crash, as well as the roars and howls of countless magical beasts. The 2 groups of beasts had collided not far in front of them. Yun Ruoyan and the others couldn't see what was happening in front of them, but from the sounds and the dust that filled the air, they could tell how terrible the situation was. Oh my God! Lin Qingshan couldn't help but cry out as she looked at the beasts that were still running forward. If this continues, who knows how many beasts are going to die? We're going to be rich. Lin Qingshan pointed at the dust in front of them. That dust is moving backward toward us. Sure enough, the cloud of dust was slowly returning to where Yun Ruoyan and the others were. It looks like the 2 groups of beasts are clashing, and our side isn't a match for them. Let's hurry up and climb up. Yun Ruoyan began crawling up the cliff face on all 4s. Oh my God, it's killing me. Lin Qingxue wailed as she looked at the precipitous cliff face above her. The Lins were different from the other families. Because of their small population, they didn't have a family academy, and Lin Zainan didn't hire a coach for them. Instead, he taught them personally. He was even stricter with Lin Qingshan, and he unconsciously relaxed around Lin Qingxue, who had a cheerful personality but was quite clever in cultivation. Thus, although the 2 sisters weren't bad at cultivation and fighting ability, they were a little lacking in terms of physical training. After hanging from the cliff for a short while, Lin Qingshue's arms were already sore and her legs were trembling. The few of them climbed another dozen meters up the cliff face, and it was also during this time that the 2 groups of beasts had reached the foot of Yun Ruoyan and the others. The screams and cries were so loud that their eardrums were about to burst. Those magical beasts that were smaller in size were directly sent flying, their bodies spinning in midair before falling with a thud and disappearing without a trace. The scene of such a tragic collision was something that the few of them would probably never forget for the rest of their lives. Careful. Yun Ruoyan suddenly saw the body of a beast the size of a pig being sent flying straight at Zhou Yifeng. Although Zhou Yifeng's movements were nimble and his stamina was the best of the group, it wasn't difficult for him to dodge the attack. The problem, however, was that Zhou Lin, who was behind him, was already struggling to hang on to her brother's body. If Zhou Yifeng's movements were any bigger, she might very well be thrown off. Yun Ruoyan watched as the beast's body was about to hit the siblings, but it was too far away for her to do so. Just then Zhou Yifeng moved. He turned around and shielded his sister between himself and the cliff face. Then he grabbed a small tree branch on the cliff face with one hand and grabbed a dent in the cliff face with the other. Then he raised his right leg and kicked the beast's head with incredible precision. Bang! The half-dead magical beast was struck in its vital spot and died before it could even land on the ground. At least it avoided the pain of being trampled on. Brother Zhou, you're amazing. Lin Qingxue couldn't help but exclaim. If not for the fact that she was holding onto the cliff face with both hands, she would have applauded loudly. But just as everyone was heaving a sigh of relief for Zhou Yifeng and his sister, the stone beneath Zhou Yifeng's feet began to fall off due to the force he had exerted. Ah! Following the exclamations of several people, One of Zhou Yifeng's legs was already suspended in the air. He hurriedly adjusted his position, trying to find a new foothold, but the stone beneath his other foot also fell off. For a moment, Zhou Yifeng's entire body was suspended in midair, his entire body weight resting on his two strong arms. Don't move. Wait for us to pull you up. Even someone as calm as Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but panic. Lin Qingxue was so frightened that she was on the verge of tears. If she fell, she would be trampled by the beast horde until not even a speck of her remains remained. Although the Lin sisters were relatively close to Zhou Yifeng, it was difficult enough for them to even look after themselves, let alone a large man like Zhou Yifeng. Only Yun Ruoyan could save them. Step by step, Yun Ruoyan began to crawl toward Zhou Yifeng. Zhou Yifeng knew that the safest course of action was to remain as still as possible and wait for Yun Ruoyan to save them. But behind him, Zhou Lin couldn't hold on any longer. Zhou Lin's slender arms and legs were in stark contrast to her brother's muscular body, and she could no longer bear her own weight. Her frail body slid down Zhou Yifeng's back. Brother. She looked at the beast horde below in despair, then turned back to Zhou Yifeng. Brother, I can't hold on any longer. Then her entire body began to fall. Lin, Zhou Yifeng shouted. His left hand loosened and he leaned to the side, grabbing onto Zhou Lin. This time, all of his weight fell on the tree trunk that he was holding in his right hand, which wasn't considered thick and sturdy. The two siblings were like withered leaves that were about to fall in autumn, on the verge of collapse. Chapter 36. The two of them hung in midair, the tide of beasts less than 10 meters away from them. At any moment beasts could charge at them, and at any moment they could fall. Brother, let go or we'll all die. Zhou Lin looked up at her brother. No, I won't let anything happen to you. Zhou Yifeng frowned, but a faint, stubborn smile hung on his lips. Lin, don't be afraid. I promised Mother that I'd protect you for the rest of your life, and I'll do it. Brother Zhou. Lin Qingxue was already crying. Don't move, don't move. I'm coming to save you. She tried to move to Zhou Yifeng's side. But she was already out of energy, and this movement almost caused her to fall. Qingxue, don't move. Take care of yourself first. Lin Qingxun called out anxiously. Although Lin Qingxun was also worried about the Zhou siblings, she was more rational than Lin Qingxue. She knew that taking care of herself was the best way to help everyone. But Brother Zhou and the others. Lin Qingxue looked at her sister awkwardly, tears streaming down her face. Don't move, I'll do it. Yun Ruoyan had already moved to the right of Zhou Yifeng and reached out to Zhou Lin. As long as Zhou Lin was safe, Zhou Yifeng would be able to save himself easily. But at this moment an accident happened again. The small tree in Zhou Yifeng's right hand couldn't bear the weight anymore. It was lifted off the ground, roots included, and completely detached from the crevice of the cliff. The small tree was Zhou Yifeng's only support. As soon as it fell, Zhou Yifeng let out a muffled grunt and pulled Zhou Lin down. Ah! All of them screamed at the same time. Lin Qingxue was so frightened that she closed her eyes. In that instant it was as if the entire world had stopped. It was only after a long while that she dared to open her eyes again, tears streaming down her cheeks like a flood. Sister, Brother Zhou and the others. She looked at Lin Qingxun by her side, her lips pursed, and she was about to burst into tears. Don't cry. Lin Qingxun looked at her and smiled. Sister, why are you, look. Lin Qingxun gestured for her to look down. Isn't your brother Zhou fine and dandy? Lin Qingxue hurriedly looked down, only to see that Yun Ruoyan was holding a sword in her left hand, the blade of which had been completely embedded into the cliff. In her right hand was an ink-black spear, and Zhou Yifeng was hanging from the other end of the long spear handle. Zhou Yifeng was already holding Zhou Lin in his arms. What happened? Lin Qingxun's expression stiffened from the overwhelming joy and shock. In the next instant her tears turned to laughter. That's great. Brother Zhou is fine now. As it turned out, the moment the sapling fell from Zhou Yifeng's right hand, Yun Ruoyan had activated the bracelet's power, pulled out her sword and stabbed it into the wall. At the same time she summoned the cloud-piercing spear that she had stored in her pocket dimension. Chanting an incantation, the spear instantly doubled in length. She shouted, "Catch him!" Zhou Yifeng reacted quickly. With one hand on Zhou Lin's waist he grabbed the other end of the spear. Of course, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't have been able to pull off such a series of actions under normal circumstances, but she had activated the bracelet's power, and it had happened in a moment of crisis. The bracelet's power flowed through Yun Ruoyan's body, then converged on her right arm. "I've got you. I'm going to pull you up," he called out to Zhou Yifeng. Then she exerted strength in her right arm and slowly pulled the Zhou siblings up under the dumbfounded gazes of the others. Yifeng was a teenager and his body was quite strong. His own weight combined with Zhou Lin's was undoubtedly a staggering weight. Yun Ruoyan, a seemingly frail 13-year-old girl, was actually able to lift such a heavy weight with just one hand. How could they not be shocked? Zhou Yifeng's shock didn't need to be mentioned. The Lin sisters were no longer calm. "Sister Ruoyan, you're so strong. Come on, come on." Lin Xianxia cheered her on. Lin Xianxia couldn't help but mutter to herself, "How did Sister Ruoyan do it? Just like when we killed the saber-toothed tiger. Sister Ruoyan's talent has exploded once again." Although Lin Xianxia found it hard to believe, this was the only explanation that made sense. Moreover, she wasn't the type of person who would waste time on such trivial matters, so she tossed the question to the back of her mind. Yun Ruoyan pulled the Zhou siblings up, only letting go after Zhou Yifeng found a new place to stand. Both siblings smiled gratefully at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan thought that she would have to find another excuse for her sudden burst of strength, but no one asked. She let out a sigh of relief. Perhaps this was the true trust between companions. Even if some things were difficult to explain, they would still choose to believe her. After the lies and persecution she'd experienced in her past life, she might never be able to trust others like this again, but she wouldn't let down anyone who was willing to trust her. "Thank you for saving us." Zhou Yifeng looked at Yun Ruoyan, his expression suddenly serious. Yun Ruoyan smiled nonchalantly, then began to chant an incantation to shrink her spear to the size of a flute, and hung it by her waist. "We beastkin have a rule. If someone risks their life to save us in a crisis, then our lives are his." Zhou Yifeng suddenly exclaimed. Yun Ruoyan's gaze finally landed on Zhou Yifeng's face. Just as seriously she replied, "It's not that serious. You've helped us before, so we're even." "No, we swore an oath to the Beast King that we'd treat our saviors as if they were our own masters." Although Zhou Yifeng said this, Yun Ruoyan didn't take it to heart. After all, who would willingly become someone else's servant? Even if the Beastkin race really did have such a rule, if she didn't want to, could he force himself on her? Seeing that Yun Ruoyan wasn't responding to him, Zhou Yifeng didn't pursue the matter, but his brows furrowed stubbornly. The tide of beasts only began to subside in the evening. Looking down at the sparse horde of magical beasts and the corpses strewn all over the ground, the group let out a collective sigh of relief. It was finally over and their hands and feet were almost no longer their own. When night fell, the tide of beasts finally ended. The group slowly climbed down the cliff, where the narrow path was littered with the corpses of magical beasts. "We're really going to be rich this time. With all these treasures, I'd be willing even if I couldn't enter Kongming Academy." Lin Xianxia couldn't stop smiling. Why didn't grandfather give us his larger spatial pouch? With so many magical beasts, just their cores alone wouldn't be able to hold them all. What a waste. Seeing so many treasures waiting for them, the group was incomparably happy, and they instantly felt that the scare they'd endured on the cliff had been worth it. Because they'd spent the entire afternoon climbing the cliff, they really didn't have the energy to deal with the corpses, so they returned to the spot where they'd rested the night before. The night passed peacefully, but Zhou Yifeng still insisted on keeping watch by himself. Yun Ruoyan couldn't overcome his stubbornness, and using the bracelet's power again during the day was quite tiring for her. She didn't insist and she closed her eyes and fell asleep. On the second day when she woke up, she found Zhou Yifeng leaning against a rock, asleep. Even if his body was made of iron, it couldn't withstand such torture. Besides, he still had to take care of Zhou Lin and prepare food for everyone. Looking at his sleeping face, she suddenly felt that it wouldn't be a bad idea to have such a capable person by her side. However, her gaze landed on Zhou Lin, who was lying on Zhou Yifeng's lap, and she shook her head. It wasn't that she disliked Zhou Lin, on the contrary, the sickly girl was quite sensible. It was just that she felt that the path she was about to embark on would be difficult, and she wasn't suited for Zhou Lin. "Wake up, everyone, wake up." Yun Ruoyan stood up and roused everyone. In the blink of an eye, It was already the 5th day since they'd entered the imperial territory. There were still 5 days before they had to reach the entrance point. Their journey here hadn't been smooth, and the journey back probably wouldn't be smooth either, so it was best to make haste. Ah! Zhou Yifeng sat up abruptly. How did I fall asleep? The few of them also came to their senses after hearing his cries. You haven't had a good night's sleep in days, so it's no surprise that you fell asleep. Yun Ruoyan smiled, not at all blaming him. Zhou Yifeng was still embarrassed. I'll go prepare some food. He ran toward the small path where there were many corpses of magical beasts, and he didn't have to spend much effort hunting. Although it was early summer, the imperial territory was rich in spiritual energy, and the magical beasts themselves possessed spiritual energy, so their corpses could often remain fresh for long periods of time. Not far from where Yun Ruoyan and the others were resting was a stream. The girls took advantage of Zhou Yifeng's absence to wash up, but they heard Zhou Yifeng's call. His voice was clearly anxious. What could have caused such a calm person to be so anxious? The girls were a little confused and worried. What's the matter? Yun Ruoyan was the first to walk up to Zhou Yifeng. Come with me to the small path at the entrance of the valley. Zhou Yifeng frowned. What's the matter? Lin Qingqian also walked over. Zhou Yifeng's expression was not only anxious, but also more confused than Yun Ruoyan and the others. His straight, black brows were deeply furrowed. More than half of those magical beasts' corpses disappeared overnight. Chapter 37. More than half of them are gone. Zhou Yifeng's description of the situation shocked the group. How is that possible? How could so many magical beasts suddenly disappear? Lin Qingxue stared at Zhou Yifeng, her eyes wide. Come with me and you'll know. Zhou Yifeng didn't explain further, because he didn't know how to explain it himself. The group arrived at the valley where the beast tide had taken place. Indeed, less than a third of the path that had been filled with the carcasses of the beasts was now empty. Everyone look. Lin Qingqian walked up to one of the carcasses. There are bite marks here. Yun Ruoyan recognized the carcass as a long-horned goat. She had once seen it in a fragmented record of 10,000 beasts. It liked to eat all sorts of spiritual herbs and was a mid-tier beast. Lin Qingqian pointed at a wound on her thigh and said, That's right. Look at these teeth marks. They weren't trampled but bitten by a beast with sharp teeth. Zhou Yifeng walked over to take a closer look. Because the beasts had all died from being trampled, the wounds on their bodies were so severe that no one had noticed. However, Lin Qingqian had always been careful and she often bandaged the wounds of her patients, so she had noticed. The group looked at the other carcasses and found that there were quite a few bite marks. Were the corpses of these magical beasts eaten by other magical beasts? Qiuqiu, Yun Ruoyan called out to Qiuqiu in her mind. Qiuqiu, mistress, what's the matter? Qiuqiu yawned. Did you hear anything last night? Qiuqiu was a little embarrassed. I fell asleep last night too. Although Qiuqiu was a mythical beast, it had been sealed for so long that it wasn't very powerful. Could only hide in the pocket dimension, and like humans, it needed adequate sleep. As a result, when Yun Ruoyan didn't call out to it, it was either cultivating or sleeping. Let's not worry about that for now, Yun Ruoyan decided. Yun Ruoyan decided not to dwell on these issues and focus on the main point. Let's hurry and get some beast cores and leave this place. The group nodded in agreement. After making some simple food to fill their stomachs, they began to collect beast cores. Most of the beasts weren't very high-ranked, but there were enough of them to keep them busy. While they were busy with their work, a voice suddenly came from the front. Damn it, someone actually arrived before us. That voice was very loud and there was anger in it. It came from afar and echoed along the cliff path. They all stopped what they were doing and looked up. A group of figures appeared at the end of the path. Yun Ruoyan's brows slowly furrowed as she saw an old acquaintance. There were about a dozen people in that group and they seemed to have the advantage of numbers. As soon as they saw Yun Ruoyan's group, they quickened their pace, giving off a menacing aura. Why is it them again? What a bunch of annoying ghosts that just won't go away. When Lin Qingxue saw the faces of the group, her expression and tone were filled with disgust. When Yun Ruoyao Peizio and the others saw Yun Ruoyan and the others, they were equally shocked. Never in their wildest dreams would they have expected that Yun Ruoyan and the others would have escaped from the demonic snake's nest, and that they would have reached the heart of the imperial territory, the Thousand Beast Valley, before them. Yun Ruoyan's gaze swept past Yun Ruoyao, Paizio and the others, before landing on a youth dressed in a dark blue robe. He was the one who said, "Damn it, someone actually got here before us." This youth was as tall and burly as Zhou Xian, and his rugged face carried a hint of viciousness. One look was enough to tell that he wasn't a kind-hearted person. From his loud shout, Yun Ruoyan could tell that this person was probably stronger than everyone else present. Without the bracelet's help, she naturally wouldn't be a match for him. "Brother Pei, didn't you say that you were the only one who knew where the Thousand Beast Valley was?" the youth asked as he walked toward Pei Zio. "Brother Wang Kuang, I didn't lie to you. Indeed, I'm the only one who knows the way to this place, but that doesn't mean that someone else might have stumbled upon it by accident." Pei Zio's gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan once more and his frown deepened. Pei Zio's father, Pei Xiong, was only a 5th-rank forge master, and his status in the Li Kingdom could only be considered above average. However, he had managed to obtain many useful secrets by forging weapons for the imperial family. Once he had taken advantage of the opportunity to forge weapons for the head guard of the imperial territory and invited him to a drink. In doing so, he had managed to obtain an important secret regarding the territory. In the depths of the imperial territory, there was an unknown place known as the Thousand Herb Valley. The valley was rich in spiritual energy and a large number of precious herbs grew there. These herbs attracted a large number of herbivorous beasts within the territory. Because of the large number of beasts, there would be a beast stampede every summer, resulting in the deaths of large numbers of beasts. This, in turn, attracted a large number of carnivorous beasts, which was why the Thousand Herb Valley was also known as the Thousand Beast Valley. However, this place was so well hidden that only those who didn't know the way would be able to enter it. As a result, outsiders were completely unaware of its existence. This secret was only known to the imperial family of the Li Kingdom, and every 3 years, they would send people to the Thousand Herb Valley to obtain the treasures they needed. This was also the most important reason why the imperial family of the Li Kingdom was stronger than the other 3 kingdoms. When Pei Xiong learned of this secret, he regretted that he hadn't known where the Thousand Herb Valley was when he had first entered the imperial territory. Otherwise, he would have risked his life to obtain some spiritual herbs and beast cores that might even help him break through. He had already been a 5th-rank forge master for 3 years. If he didn't break through soon, the Pei family's status in the imperial city would only continue to drop. Thus, when his son Pei Zio was about to enter the imperial territory, he told him this secret and repeatedly urged his son to obtain a high-grade beast core or medicinal herb to help him cultivate. "Brother Wang Kuang." Pei Zio leaned in close to Wang Kuang and whispered, "You swore that I brought you here to obtain treasures, so when we get out you're going to keep this secret to yourself. If the imperial family found out that he was the one who had leaked this secret, he would be doomed. Don't worry, I won't harm you. I'll definitely keep this secret to myself." Wang Kuang patted his chest confidently. "Which family are you from? How did you get here?" A slender youth named Lu Xing pointed arrogantly at Yun Ruoyan's group. The remaining youths also looked at Yun Ruoyan's group arrogantly. At this time, Yun Ruoyao and her sisters were hiding at the back. On one hand, they felt somewhat guilty for failing to harm Yun Ruoyan, and on the other, they were happy to see the Yu Kingdom deal with Yun Ruoyan's group. "We're from the Yun and Lin families of the Li Kingdom. Which kingdom are you from?" Naturally, Yun Ruoyan wasn't afraid of this group. Despite their apparent strength, Yun Ruoyan, who had lived 2 lives, was able to maintain her composure. Moreover, Yun Ruoyan knew that the truly frightening people were those with brains such as Yi Qianying. These youths were clearly brainless. "You're from the Yun family?" Lu Xing looked at Yun Ruoyan, then at Yun Ruoyao. "You're a family?" "Yes, we're a family." Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyan walked out from the back and said to Lu Xing, "She's my sister, the second daughter of the Yun family." "Sister Run, it's great that you're still alive." Yi Qianying exclaimed happily. The expression on her pretty face as if she were on the verge of tears was real. "Oh, so she's that ugly girl from the Yun family." A girl in the crowd, similarly dressed in a red outfit, giggled. Over the past few days, they'd heard a little about Yun Ruoyao from the youths of the capital. Coupled with Yun Ruoyao's influence over the past 2 days, they didn't have a good impression of her. Sister Fei, or why is there blood on her birthmark? So disgusting. Another girl chimed in. The wound on her birthmark had been leaking pus and blood over the past 2 days, and she didn't have to worry about it in front of her own people. As a result, when she washed up in the morning, Yun Ruoyan had tied up her fringe, exposing her birthmark and scar. They say that an ugly face is evil inside, and that's not wrong at all. The red-dressed girl was called Jean Fei, and she wrinkled her nose in disgust. What do you mean by that? Lin Qingxue jumped up. Ever since she was a child, she had always admired her cousin, who was known as a cultivation genius. Even though her cousin had become a cripple and gradually drifted apart from them, that didn't change the impression she had of her cousin. Now, not only had her cousin gotten closer to them again, but she had also displayed exceptional intelligence and bravery. She had long since regarded her cousin as her idol. How could she tolerate someone insulting her sister, her idol, right in front of her? Explain yourself or I won't let you off today. Lin Qingxue held a pair of daggers in her hands, the edges still stained with the blood of the magical beasts. And who do you think you are? I'm talking about Yun Ruoyan. What does it have to do with you? Jean Fei, didn't back down. Listen up. Lin Qingxue slung her daggers behind her back and gestured her name. I'm Lin Qingxue, the second miss of the Lin family. Lin Zainan is my grandfather and this is my sister Lin Qingchen. Lin Qingchen nodded coolly, acknowledging her greeting. Lin Zainan's name resounded throughout the Qinyuan continent, and Fei, had naturally heard of him as well. She couldn't help but sound a little more respectful. Oh, Master Lin's granddaughter. That's me. Yun Ruoyan is my cousin as well as Master Lin's granddaughter. What right do you have to insult her? I didn't say that. Jean Fei, raised her hand and looked at her fingernails, her eyes drifting toward Yun Ruyao and the others. It was her sister, Yun Ruyao, who said that she didn't care about her own family's interests and instead helped outsiders. She even said that you'd lost your lives because you thought you were smart, but why aren't you dead yet? Lin Qingxue's temper flared up when she heard this. Not only had she schemed against them, but she was also trying to ruin their reputations. Yun Ruoyan was also so angry that she began to laugh. She looked toward Yun Ruyao and asked, Sister, who's the one who's trying to harm who? Have you lost your memory? Yun Ruyao pretended to be calm. Sister, I don't want to argue with you. Since you're safe and sound, Father will make his decision once we get out of here. Is that so? Yun Ruoyan's eyes were mocking. From the moment she lost her talent for cultivation, no, perhaps even earlier than that, her father had made his decision for her. Oh my, this is good stuff. Just as the atmosphere was tense, Lu Xing suddenly called out from the side. Everyone's gaze was drawn to him. He was squatting in front of the corpse of a flaming steed, a fiery red beast core in his hand. He was grinning from ear to ear. The flaming steed was a mid-rank magical beast, and although its core wasn't as good as the saber-toothed tigers, it was still worth quite a bit of money on the market. Wang Kuang quickly walked over and smacked Lu Xing on the head. I told you not to move around. Why are you so annoying? Put it back. Without the beast core, the meat won't even taste good. How are you going to attract higher-ranked beasts? Oh, I forgot about it as soon as I saw the treasure. Lu Xing looked at Wang Kuang innocently, then painfully put the beast core back into the flaming steed's body. Big brother is right. You can't catch the wolf without risking the child. But big brother, how did you know about this good place? Not only can you get so many beast cores for free, but you can also capture high-rank beasts. Me? Wang Kuang smiled as he glanced at Pei Zio, then smacked Lu Xing on the head again. Why do you care how I know? Just do as I say. Then he turned to Yun Ruoyan. You've already dug out the beast cores, but from now on, you're not allowed to dig them out again. You can leave now. Yun Ruoyan raised an eyebrow. Why? Chapter 38. Wang Kuang hadn't expected that the thin, ugly girl in front of him would speak in such a manner, and her tone even seemed a little provocative. Oh. A sinister smile appeared on his face. So you still want to stay? What right do you have? He rubbed his chin with interest. What right do I have? Yun Ruoyan raised her head and puffed out her chest, not bothering to hide her frightening appearance. After all, she didn't rely on her looks but on her strength. Because of this, Yun Ruoyan stretched out her right hand and slowly clenched it into a fist. Ah! Wang Kuang looked at the clearly underdeveloped, skinny girl in front of him, clenching her small hand into a fist and saying, because of this. He was truly amused. Because of that? He pointed at Yun Ruoyan's small fist as he looked to his left and right. Ha ha. Lu Xing clutched his stomach as he laughed. He stretched out his own fist and squeezed his voice. Because of this? Using my little fist to punch your chest? Ha! Another burst of laughter followed. The others also began to laugh at Lu Xing's tone and actions, and Yun Ruoyao and the others also looked at him disdainfully. Only Pei Zio's expression was serious. He'd seen Yun Ruoyan's nimble movements before, and not to mention her cultivation level, just the strange footwork she'd displayed against the saber-toothed tiger had left a deep impression on him. And how had Yun Ruoyan and the others managed to escape from certain death twice? Was it purely luck? His gaze swept over the tiger's fang at Shui Feng's waist, and he had a feeling that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Sister Ruoyan, you're only a third-rank blade master and you can't even compare to me, so don't force yourself. Yi Qianying advised in an extremely sincere tone, take the beast core and leave quickly. You, shut up. Lin Qingxue interrupted her. Yi Qianying, I think you're doing this on purpose. Although it was possible to determine the opponent's cultivation from the aura they exuded, they couldn't be sure. This was because some people with high cultivation could hide their cultivation in front of people who were weaker than them. As a result, even though Wang Kuang and the others were laughing at Yun Ruoyan, they still had some misgivings. This girl looked so weak, but her calm demeanor didn't match her cultivation at all. There were only two reasons for this to happen. First, the little girl was pretending to be weak to eat the tiger. Secondly, this little girl was someone who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Although it was rumored in the imperial city that the daughter of the Yun family was trash, perhaps she had some secret technique that could raise her cultivation, or perhaps it was all fake news. I'm not talking nonsense. I'm doing this out of kindness. I don't want you to suffer any losses, Yi Qianying said softly, feeling wronged. Ever since 3 years ago when Sister Ruoyan's cultivation didn't improve, the family academy gave up on her. Don't force yourself, okay? Yun Ruoyan glanced at him coldly. Indeed, a dog that bites doesn't bark. While pretending to be a good person, he'd completely exposed her true colors. Under Yun Ruoyan's gaze, Yi Qianying couldn't help but hide behind Pei Zio. So the rumors were true. At first, Wang Kuang had been a little hesitant, but after Yi Qianying's words he didn't have the slightest bit of hesitation. It seemed that he really had met a young miss who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. What's wrong? Yun Ruoyan looked at Wang Kuang with a faint smile. Are you afraid? I'm afraid. Wang Kuang felt that this was the funniest thing he'd ever heard in his life. Not only did this ugly girl not know the immensity of heaven and earth, but she was also a little foolish. I don't want to fight an idiot. You go. He motioned to Lu Xing by his side. All right. Lu Xing rubbed his fist and walked up, a smile on his face. I'm here to punch you in the chest with my little fists. Sister Ruoyan, I'll go. Lin Qingxue was about to step forward when Lin Qingchen grabbed her. From his aura, I can tell that he's a peak 4th-rank blade master. You're only an early 4th-rank blade master, so you're not his match. Let me, Shui Feng said. I only need a single punch to deal with a small fry like him. No. Yun Ruoyan's tone was light, but her meaning was clear. I'll do it. But Sister Ruoyan. Everyone objected at the same time. Don't you trust me? Yun Ruoyan's tone was still light, but she exuded an aura of confidence. Sister Ruoyan, of course we trust you. Lin Qingxue exclaimed. I trust you too. Lin Qingchen nodded. Almost all of the dangers they'd encountered along the way had been resolved by Ruoyan, who seemed to be the weakest of them all. What reason did they have not to trust her? She was always able to make the impossible possible. A smile appeared on Yun Ruoyan's solemn face. He liked the feeling of being trusted. She took 2 steps forward and stood opposite Lu Xing. Please advise me. Shui Feng gently put Zhuo Lin down and walked to the side, near where the two were about to fight. As soon as Yun Ruoyan was in danger, he would rush forward without hesitation. All right. Although you're so ugly that I don't like it, I'll still guide you. Lu Xing smiled carelessly, his gaze impolite as he looked Yun Ruoyan up and down. I won't take advantage of you. To tell you the truth, I'm already a peak 4th rank blade master, so I'd advise you not to try anything funny. Shut up. Yun Ruoyan unsheathed the sword at her waist and charged at Lu Xing, her speed quite fast. In the blink of an eye, the tip of her sword was aimed at Lu Xing's head. Before Lu Xing could even draw his sword, Yun Ruoyan's sword had already arrived in front of him. He cried out in shock as he ducked and barely dodged the blade, but a tuft of hair on his head was cut off. Watch my sword. Yun Ruoyan didn't give Lu Xing any time to breathe. Her footwork was strange and her sword was like the wind. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 3 consecutive strikes, each one fast and ruthless, forced Lu Xing into a sorry state. Sister Ruoyan, you're amazing. Lin Qingxue yelled excitedly. Sister Ruoyan, cut off his head, cut off his mouth, cut off his nose. Sister Ruoyao. Yun Ruoyu's face was pale as she glanced at Yun Ruoyao. How is Yun Ruoyan so strong? She's only using the most common swordplay of the Yun family, so how is she able to force Lu Xing to retreat? Yun Ruoyao shook her head slightly, but the shock in her heart was no less than Yun Ruoyu's. Both of them had lost to Yun Ruoyan before, and even their arrogant brother Yun Muin had suffered at Yun Ruoyan's hands. However, they'd always thought that they'd been careless, giving Yun Ruoyan an opportunity to take advantage of. But the battle before them was real. No, it's only because Lu Xing underestimated his opponent that Yun Ruoyan had the upper hand. Yun Ruoyao had finally found a reason for both her and Yun Ruoyu to relax a little. Look, her moves are powerful, but none of them are particularly powerful. If she were really that strong, the sword chi on her blade would have seriously injured Lu Xing. There's no way he'd be able to dodge. Yun Ruoyu let out a sigh of relief, thinking that Yun Ruoyao's analysis was spot on. The sword Yun Ruoyan used was the most common sword of the Yun family, and her swordplay was the most basic swordplay taught to her by the instructors. However, having lived 2 lives, she was far more experienced in combat, and her understanding of swordplay was naturally more thorough than that of others. As a result, against someone with a stronger cultivation like Lu Xing, as long as she had the upper hand and didn't give him any chance to use his spiritual energy, she could force him to the point where he couldn't even retaliate. You shameless bastard. Lu Xing stumbled as he was chased. Every time he tried to pull out his sword, Yun Ruoyan's blade would accurately slice off his wrist. As a result, he didn't even have a chance to use his weapon, let alone his cultivation. Humph. Yun Ruoyan sneered. What's shameless? A win is a win, a loss is a loss. Only those who can afford to lose are shameless. If you have the guts, make me draw my sword. I can subdue you with a single strike. Oh. Yun Ruoyan sneered again. I won't give you that chance. As she spoke, she quickened her pace and her swordplay became even more dazzling. Lu Xing's body and face were bleeding from the blade, especially his face, where Yun Ruoyan had given him a deep gash. How dare he call her ugly? Although she didn't care anymore, that didn't mean anyone could do that to her. My face. Lu Xing screamed and fell to the ground with a thud. Whoosh. Yun Ruoyan paused, and the tip of her sword pointed at the tip of Lu Xing's nose. Do you admit defeat? Her gaze was cold. If you don't, I don't mind cutting off your nose and making you even more disgusting than me. I admit defeat, I admit defeat. Lu Xing covered his bleeding face with one hand and raised the other high. Yun Ruoyan sheathed her sword. Lu Xing scrambled back to Wang Kuang's side. Useless. Jin Fei looked at Lu Xing in disgust. You can't even draw your sword? What have you been doing all this time? In the eyes of an ordinary person, Lu Xing had lost very miserably. His opponent was able to force him to the point where he couldn't even fight back with just a sword technique. His so-called peak level 4 spirit force cultivation didn't even need to be used at all. Lu Xing, on the other hand, looked aggrieved, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He just felt that he was clearly stronger than his opponent, but he had lost in such a baffling manner. If you're so good, you can do it yourself. He yelled at Jin Fei. That vicious girl. She's really ruthless. I'm really going to be disfigured this time. Blood continued to seep out of his face, and he couldn't stop it no matter how hard he tried. Who knew how many blood vessels Yun Ruoyan's sword had severed? Fine, I'll do it. Jin Fei said nonchalantly. She drew her sword from her waist and smiled at Lu Xing. Wait for me to avenge you. Chapter 39. Jean Feier's cultivation was much higher than Lu Xing's, and she was already at the peak of 4th rank on the cusp of 5th rank. However, she still cautiously unsheathed her sword, so that Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be able to use the same trick again. Wang Kuang pulled Jean Fei back. From the way her sword blows, it's true that this girl's cultivation isn't high, and her swordsmanship isn't particularly impressive. However, her footwork and swordsmanship have almost reached the point of perfection. Wang Kuang's eyes lit up as he glanced at Lu Xing, who was tending to his wound. Half his face was already covered in blood. Others might not have noticed, but he did. By the time Lu Xing's wound healed, he would discover that the scars would form the word ugly that covered half his face. Even he couldn't use the sword to such an extent. That's why you have to avoid the important and focus on the trivial. Don't compete in sword techniques. You have to use spiritual energy to suppress her. Alright, Brother Wang, I understand. Jean Fei smiled at Wang Kuang, swaying her hips as she walked forward. What's the meaning of this? Are you going to take turns? Lin Qingxue wasn't willing to accept this. She already had the upper hand in terms of cultivation, and now she was being forced to take turns? Wasn't this bullying? Jean Fei smiled. You can send someone else and it'll be a best of 3. Alright, I'll do it. The Lin sisters agreed simultaneously. Zhou Yifeng stood there like a pillar. He only had one goal: to rush out and protect Yun Ruoyan when the time came. No need. Yun Ruoyan's face was as calm as ever, but her body was burning with passion. She had felt this way ever since she had entered the imperial territory and killed her first canine. When she had killed that canine, she hadn't used the bracelet's power. Instead, she had relied entirely on her own reflexes and mastery of swordsmanship to cut open the canine's stomach with a single strike. This had greatly increased her confidence in her swordsmanship. Later, when she had killed the saber-toothed tiger, she had used the bracelet's power, and that sense of accomplishment had lessened. As a result, she needed to hone her skills through actual combat. I'll do it, she emphasized. Good, you've got guts. Jean Fei got into a stance. Chirp chirp, master, you can do it. Qiu seemed to feel Yun Ruoyan's blood boiling and she was very excited. However, she didn't forget to remind Yun Ruoyan, Mistress, if you can't win, use the bracelet's power immediately. I'm here. Yun Ruoyan called out to Jean Fei, and once again she used her strange footwork to attack Jean Fei. Jean Fei, on the other hand, had already activated the spiritual energy in her body and infused it into her sword. She raised her arm and drew a circle in front of her, her spiritual energy forming a barrier in front of her. Jean Fei didn't hide her pinnacle 4th level cultivation at all, and she used it so simply and brutally. Yun Ruoyan's sword stopped in front of her spiritual barrier, unable to advance any further. A low cultivation base is a low cultivation base. Jean Fei laughed mockingly as she brandished her sword. Your little tricks can only be used against idiots like Lu Xing. Jean Fei stepped forward, and a gust of spiritual energy wrapped around Yun Ruoyan's sword. With a clang, the sword in Yun Ruoyan's hand was broken into several pieces by Jean Fei's gust of wind. The Lin sisters let out a startled cry. After all, Yun Ruoyan was relying on her 3rd-rank cultivation to deal with an opponent much stronger than her, and their hearts had been in their throats the entire time. Jean Fei quickened her pace as she closed in on the weaponless Yun Ruoyan, as if she wanted to crush Yun Ruoyan just like her sword. However, Yun Ruoyan's footwork was slightly better than Jean Fei's, and she was still much faster than Jean Fei. Mistress, Qiu called out. At this rate you'll expend more energy than your opponent. Let's use the bracelet's power now. With the bracelet's power, Yun Ruoyan's strength would be doubled, which was equivalent to a 6th-rank cultivator. Combined with the battle experience she had accumulated over 2 lifetimes, she was confident of victory even without a weapon. But if she did that, she wouldn't be able to achieve her goal of training. In this battle, I'll still have to rely on my own strength. Yun Ruoyan spoke to Qiu in her mind. She pretended to reach into her robes with her right hand, but in reality she was summoning her spear from her pocket dimension. She began chanting, and when she took her hand out, a flute-like object appeared in her hand. In front of Jean Fei's eyes, the flute-like object instantly grew 10 times its original size, and a snow-white arrowhead pierced straight into the center of her spiritual energy shield. With a clang, Jean Fei's sword collided with the spear and was sent flying. The tip of the spear was pointed at the tip of Jean Fei's nose. All of this happened as fast as lightning. The spear was a high-grade spiritual weapon, and Yun Ruoyan could temporarily unleash the power of a 5th-rank blade master by injecting all of her 3rd-rank spiritual energy into it. Coupled with the sturdiness of the spear and the sharpness of its tip, Jean Fei was naturally no match for it. Wait! A loud roar suddenly exploded, followed by a clang sound. Yun Ruoyan felt her hands go numb and the spear almost slipped out of her hands. She couldn't help but take a few steps back. Jean Fei's hands were on the ground, her eyes wide open. The tip of the spear had been right at the tip of her nose. It had almost sliced off her nose. A high-grade spiritual weapon. Wang Kuang stood in front of Jean Fei, his tone somewhat shocked. You actually have a high-grade spiritual weapon? When a weapon reached a high-grade level, it could change its length and size according to an incantation, and it could greatly increase its attack power. It was a rare treasure. Even a large family wouldn't have more than 3 such weapons in their collection. It seems like the rumors weren't true. Wang Kuang stroked his chin, his eyes narrowing into slits. Your cultivation might not be high, but you're definitely not the cripple you're rumored to be. Your family hasn't given up on you and they're even willing to pass on a high-grade spiritual weapon to you. Brother Wang Kuang, you've misunderstood. Pei Xiao took a few quick steps forward. This spear belongs to the Pei family. The moment Yun Ruoyan had taken out the spear, he had been both surprised and delighted. Delighted that he'd finally gotten his spear back. If he'd really lost it, he really wouldn't know how to explain himself. Surprised that Yun Ruoyan was able to wield the spear, even though the Pei family's spear clearly required at least a 5th-rank blade master to wield its full power. But Yun Ruoyan's attack on Jean Fei had clearly been powerful. And how did Yun Ruoyan know the incantation to transform the spear? Was it something that had been passed down by word of mouth? Originally, Yun Ruoyan hadn't wanted to take out the spear. After all, she still needed it to force Pei Yingxiong to help her forge the tiger canine arrowheads. But she really wanted to fight head-on, and the satisfaction of such an intense battle was something she'd never experienced in her previous life. As a result, she didn't hesitate to take out the spear. Sister Ruoyan, return my spear to me. Pei Xiao stepped forward and extended his hand toward Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan looked at him, her eyes incomparably cold. Her lips slowly curled up in a cold smile. Return it to you? What right do you have to give it back to me? Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but think back to her past life. At that time she had been so obedient to Pei Xiao that as long as he extended his hand to her, she would give it to him without hesitation. But that Yun Ruoyan was completely dead. In this life her eyes had been polished and her heart no longer clouded by lard. Unless she was willing, no one would be able to ask for anything from her. Pei Xiao was a little anxious. Because it's surnamed Pei and because it's a treasure of the Pei family. Oh. Yun Ruoyan's smile widened. Then call out to it and see if it responds. You? Pei Xiao was furious. Yun Ruoyan, I didn't expect you to be such an unreasonable woman. Ha 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 ha. Yun Ruoyan laughed out loud. Reasonable? She'd been poisoned since she was young, and not only had her appearance been ruined, she'd also lost her talent for cultivation. Who could reason with her? For a man, she'd fallen out with her elders and sisters, but in the end her family had been ruined by that man. Who could reason with her now? If the world was unreasonable, if your opponents were unreasonable, then you could only argue with them about intelligence, martial arts, and who was more ruthless. Yun Ruoyan held her spear with both hands, her hair tied up high. Her fiery red outfit accentuated her slender figure, making her look like a javelin. The red birthmark on her face, coupled with her cold smile, was a ghastly sight to behold. No one understood why the ugly woman in front of them suddenly seemed to be stimulated by something. At the same time she seemed to be a little crazy, and at the same time her body was also emitting a powerful aura. Sister Ruoyan, what's the matter? Lin Xianxia asked, a little worried. Nothing, just that someone suddenly wants to reason with me. I find it funny, Yun Ruoyan said, laughing. Pei Xiao's face turned red from Yun Ruoyan's mocking laughter, and he couldn't restrain his anger. If not for Yi Qianying who was by his side holding him back, he would have rushed to Yun Ruoyon's side. Sister Ruoyon, why don't you return the spear to Brother Zio? It's clearly not yours and you don't have the right to possess it. Even if I don't have the right, does someone who threw away his family's treasure in order to escape have the right to possess it? Yun Ruoyon's words silenced both Yi Qianying and Pei Zio. Sister Ruoyon, the Yuns and the Peis are on friendly terms right now. I'd advise you not to do anything that would ruin the relationship between the two families. Yun Ruoyon snorted, completely ignoring her words. She turned to Wang Kuang and said coolly, rather than reason, you prefer martial arts, don't you? Chapter 40. Miss Yun, you're quite a straightforward person. Wang Kuang squinted habitually and rubbed his chin. I really underestimated you, Miss Yun. You've defeated my men again and again, and if I don't defeat you, we won't have the face to show our faces in the Li Kingdom anymore. How shameless! Lin Qingxue exclaimed. You've already lost 2 out of 3 and you still want to fight? This concerns the honor of the Yu Kingdom, so we have no choice but to fight, Wang Kuang continued. Wang Kuang said, you guys can also take turns fighting me. If you can defeat me, I won't fight Miss Yun anymore. But in my opinion, none of you 3 can last more than 3 moves from me. Don't bother. Yun Ruoyon raised a hand to stop the Lin sisters from speaking. I'll fight you instead. After 2 consecutive victories, although Yun Ruoyon was a little tired, she was still eager to fight. Straightforward. Wang Kuang raised his right hand. His lips opened and closed, and the dagger in his hand morphed into an ancient sword. The Wang family's superior-grade spiritual weapon, the spirit-severing sword. Wang Kuang held the sword horizontally in front of him. Miss Yun, please. All right. Yun Ruoyon's hands trembled as she thrust the spear toward Wang Kuang's head. Wang Kuang tilted his head and used the sword in his hand to block the spear's attack. The cloud-piercing spear collided with the edge of the treasured sword with a clang, and sparks splashed out. Yun Ruoyon felt her hand go numb, and she spun around to dissipate the force of the collision. This high-grade spiritual sword was indeed extraordinary, but it still seemed a little lacking compared to the Pei family's spear. Yun Ruoyon hadn't used the bracelet's power in that attack. She had relied solely on her 3rd-rank Blade Master strength to take on Wang Kuang, who was much stronger than her, and she had almost lost. Wang Kuang looked at Yun Ruoyon's calm expression and he was more and more surprised. He was already a 6th-rank Blade Master, and that was quite an impressive feat for his age. This level of cultivation was considered very outstanding for his age. At the very least in the state of Yu, it was rare for someone of the same age to be his match. Although he hadn't used his full strength, he had used at least 40% of it. Coupled with the sword's power, Yun Ruoyon, who seemed to be much younger than him, had actually been able to withstand it. Good, not bad. Wang Kuang's tone carried a trace of praise, but the malevolence in his eyes didn't recede in the slightest. There had to be a reason for this abnormality, and he wanted to see just what this legendary piece of trash of the Yun family was up to. This time it was Wang Kuang's turn to attack. His feet moved in a strange manner as he attacked Yun Ruoyon with his sword. Clang, clang, clang. After 3 consecutive collisions, Yun Ruoyon was forced back step by step under Wang Kuang's relentless assault. Suddenly her left hand slipped and the spear almost slipped out of her hand. Fortunately, Yun Ruoyon's reaction was fast enough. She ducked and rolled on the ground, dodging Wang Kuang's attack and regaining her grip on the spear. This time Wang Kuang used 50% of his strength, as well as a low-grade footwork technique that greatly enhanced his attack power. Yun Ruoyon still didn't use the bracelet's power. She stood up from the ground, her forehead covered in a fine layer of sweat. The sweat flowed down her forehead into the scar on her face, causing a numbing sensation. Look, her face is oozing blood again. How disgusting. That's right, is this a method to disgust her opponent to death because she can't beat him? Jean Fei, and the other girl from the Yu Kingdom chattered on in an attempt to divert Yun Ruoshue's attention. Despicable. She shouted, it's fine if the strong bully the weak and the strong bully the weak, but you people of you have really opened my eyes. If your sister hadn't suddenly ambushed me with a spiritual weapon, I wouldn't have lost. Jean Fei, had already recovered from her shock. Thinking back to the battle just now, she felt that she'd lost even more pitifully than Lu Xing, and that her nose had almost been sliced off. That's Yun Ruoyan. Brother Wang is a peak 6th rank blade master. Just you wait to collect Yun Ruoyan's corpse. The Lin sisters' heart sank. Collect her corpse? It seemed that Wang Kuang was intent on killing her. That's just how stubborn my sister is. Yun Ruoyao shook her head helplessly. She's the sole wife-born daughter of the Yu family, and she's been a genius cultivator since she was young. Everyone flatters her, so she's not afraid of anyone. Whatever she wants to do, she does as she pleases. Now that her talent has disappeared and she's become a cripple, her personality hasn't changed at all. It's time for her to go out and suffer. Sister Ruoyan isn't a cripple. Lin Qingxue blurted out. She was drugged by your Yun family. Lin Qingchen immediately covered Lin Qingxue's mouth. When Yun Ruoyan had mentioned this matter to them, she told them to keep it a secret. Lin Qingchen looked at her sister reproachfully. Lin Qingxue also knew that she'd almost divulged the secret, so she ignored her sister's mockery and looked nervously at Yun Ruoyan. Good. Wang Kuang yelled, quickening his footwork as he rushed in front of Yun Ruoyan. He slashed, stabbed and slashed at her repeatedly, not holding back at all. Yun Ruoyan didn't even have time to blink as she was attacked. She managed to use her agility to evade the attacks, but she was still forced to take a few steps back. Clang. When Wang Kuang once again dodged Yun Ruoyan's spear and stabbed at her from close range, Yun Ruoyan shrunk her spear to the length of a sword, and the tip of the spear met the tip of the sword. This time there was no longer any form of entanglement. In a contest of pure spiritual energy, the spiritual energy of a peak 6th rank blade master and the spiritual energy of a novice 3rd rank blade master were completely overpowered. In a contest of spiritual energy like this, the weaker party would often be heavily injured or even killed on the spot. Sister Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan. The Lin sisters and Zhu Yifeng, who had been clenching his fists tightly, couldn't help but feel their hearts tighten. Wang Kuang didn't pour all of his spiritual energy into the sword at once. Instead, he used 3 layers of spiritual energy as a base, slowly and gradually infused it. It had been a long time since he'd met someone as interesting as Yun Ruoyan, and killing her in one fell swoop would be too boring. He had a feeling that Yun Ruoyan wasn't as simple as she seemed. He wanted to see what kind of surprise Yun Ruoyan would bring him in her final struggle. Yun Ruoyan's entire body was drenched in sweat. She'd already poured all of her spiritual energy into the spear in her hand, and for a moment she was barely able to resist the spiritual energy from the sword. However, Wang Kuang was clearly slowly suppressing her. His spiritual energy was getting stronger and stronger, and she finally couldn't hold on any longer. Mistress, hurry up and use the bracelet's power. Qiu urged. Yun Ruoyan looked at the bracelet on her wrist and her stubborn frown finally relaxed. She was very satisfied with her performance today. With great difficulty she raised her left hand and placed it on her right wrist. With a light twist, a steady stream of spiritual energy flowed from the bracelet into her body, and under Yun Ruoyan's control into the spear in her right hand. Wang Kuang had been slowly suppressing Yun Ruoyan. Just now he'd only used 40% of his strength and she was about to collapse. However, his opponent's strength had suddenly increased, and he was sent flying back by the force. He spat out a mouthful of blood. How was this possible? He looked at Yun Ruoyan in shock. There really was something wrong with this ugly girl. How is this possible? Brother Wang. Oh my god. Yun Ruoyao, Jin Fei, and Pei Zio all cried out in shock. How could Yun Ruoyan's spiritual energy be stronger than Wang Kuang's? Sister Ruoyan won. That's great. Sister Ruoyan's talent has exploded. Lin Qingxue shouted and jumped excitedly. What did that mean? What did she mean by that? Lin Qingxue's words immediately raised the suspicions of Yun Ruoyao and the others. Did you really think that Sister Ruoyan's talent had disappeared? Let me tell you, it was only dormant for a short while, and now it's finally time for it to awaken. Lin Qingxue placed her hands on her hips proudly. Had her dormant talent finally awakened? Was that the reason? Even so, he didn't believe that a 6th-rank blade master like him would lose to a novice 3rd-rank blade master. He'd simply been careless earlier. If that's the case, there's no need to hold back. Wang Kuang raised his spiritual energy to 6th rank and infused it all into his sword. Yun Ruian once again felt the pressure. Wang Kuang was a peak 6th rank cultivator, while Yun Ruian was only an early stage 6th rank cultivator even after using the bracelet's power. Mistress, what do you do? You're no match for him. Qiuqiu's anxious voice rang out in Yun Ruian's mind. Once the bracelet seal is activated, it'll last for at least a year before it can be activated again. What do you do? Why don't you admit defeat? It's not that simple. Yun Ruian's entire body was drenched in sweat, and the pus and blood on her face continued to drip down. The numbness and itchiness grew stronger and stronger. He's clearly trying to kill me. Even if I admit defeat, I won't be able to escape. Then mistress, release the Fei Lai blade. No, I can't. If I use even a fraction of my spiritual energy to summon the Fei Lai blade, I'll immediately be killed by the surging spiritual energy. Then what do I do? What do I do? Qiuqiu paced around anxiously in the bracelet's pocket dimension. Suddenly Yun Ruian felt a slight change in her body. Her previously empty dantian had suddenly produced a small, weak flow of energy. It was a spiritual vortex. She'd finally regained her spiritual vortex. The spiritual vortex was a part of a cultivator's dantian that was used to store spiritual energy when they broke through to 3rd rank. 3 years ago, Yun Ruian had vaguely felt that she had regained her spiritual vortex, but the sudden deterioration of her talent had caused it to disappear. Now, however, she could feel the presence of her spiritual vortex once again. She had broken through. 3 years, 3 whole years, and she had finally broken through to 4th rank. But Yun Ruian suddenly raised her head to the sky and let out a long howl that pierced through the clouds. Everyone was stunned by her howl. Pfft. At the same time as the howl, Wang Kuang once again spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body had been sent flying by a powerful wave of spiritual energy, and he landed heavily on the ground. How is this possible? Blood continued to spurt out of his mouth. His opponent had actually broken through at this moment, and what was even more unbelievable was that the wave of spiritual energy that had rushed toward him hadn't just increased by 1 rank. Could someone actually break through 2 ranks at once? Impossible. Chapter 41. Sister Qingchen. Lin Qingxue pulled on Lin Qingchen's arm. Sister Ruian broke through, Sister Ruian broke through. Yes, that's right. Lin Qingchen also stared unblinkingly at the girl in front of her. Sister Ruian, you've finally broken through. Zhou Yifeng, who had been standing by the side the entire time, finally unclenched his fists. Traces of fresh blood dripped down from his palms, but he didn't seem to feel any pain at all. Instead, his tightly pursed lips curved upward. Yun Ruiyao, Yun Ruoyu, Yi Qianying and Pei Zio were all dumbfounded. Brother Wang. After a long while, Jin Fei, and the other Yu students finally reacted and cried out in shock. Impossible, impossible. Jin Fei, shook her head. Brother Wang, how could you possibly lose to that ugly girl? But the impossible had just happened. As a 3rd-rank blade master, not only had Yun Ruian defeated 3 people far more powerful than her, she had even broken through at the last moment. Her 4th-rank spiritual energy, boosted by the bracelet, had tripled, and she was now as powerful as an 8th-rank blade master, completely crushing Wang Kuang, who was only a peak 6th-rank blade master. All Wang Kuang felt was a huge wave of spiritual energy rushing toward him. His attacks were instantly shattered, and his body flew far away like a kite with its string cut. Fresh blood spurted out of his mouth as he watched the red-clad girl walk toward him. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Yun Ruian walked up to Wang Kuang and pointed the spear in her hand at him. Do you admit defeat? She asked coolly. I don't. Wang Kuang spat out the words with great difficulty. There's something fishy about you. Fishy? Yun Ruian squatted down and looked at Wang Kuang coldly. What's fishy about me? Wang Kuang couldn't put his finger on it, but even if she had broken through, she was only a 4th-rank cultivator, so how could she have crushed his peak 6th-rank spiritual energy? What was even more strange was that the sudden surge of spiritual power was not something that a level 4 cultivator could possess. It was impossible for anyone to break through 2 levels at once. No, judging from that huge spiritual power, it was clearly more than 2 levels. Unless... Wang Kuang's eyes widened as he pointed at Yun Ruian. You're a demon. Monster. Yun Ruian paused. She'd been poisoned, her face had been ruined, and she'd been reborn with hatred. Wouldn't that make her a demon? Yes, I'm a demon. Yun Ruoyan's gaze suddenly turned distant and distant as she gazed into the distance. The sun was setting over the cliff. Brother Wang. Wang Kuang. Jin Fei, Pazio and the others called out as they ran over, but they stopped right in front of the two of them. Yun Ruoyan crouched in front of Wang Kuang. She seemed so small that even a slightly stronger person would be able to lift her up effortlessly. However, it was this small body that had exploded with immense power. The tall and strong Wang Kuang was half lying on the ground, his eyes filled with fear as he looked at Yun Ruoyan. Demon, demon, he repeated over and over again. Yun Ruoyan ignored him and stood up. She glanced coolly at the Yu people, then walked toward Lin Qingxue and the others. Only then did Jin Fei and the others dare to approach her. Brother Wang. Jin Fei hugged Wang Kuang, crying as she took out a pill and fed it to him. His spiritual vortex has been destroyed and his heart has been severed, Pazio said as he grabbed Wang Kuang's wrist. Brother Wang, how could this be? How could this be? Jin Fei cried. This shouldn't have happened. Their group had always been the ones to bully others, and it was always them who killed others. How could there be a day when they themselves would be killed? The dying Wang Kuang suddenly grabbed Jin Fei's hand, his slender eyes widening. He pointed at Yun Ruoyan's back and said hoarsely, "Revenge, let my brother avenge me." As soon as he finished speaking, he spat out another mouthful of blood and stopped breathing. Compared to the Yu people, Yun Ruoyan's side was naturally overjoyed. Sister Ruoyan, you're amazing. Lin Qingxue held onto Yun Ruoyan's hand as she jumped up and down. Yun Ruoyan's sorrowful mood was instantly washed away by her cousin's happiness. How was it? I didn't disappoint you, did I? Yun Ruoyan smiled. Yes. Lin Qingxue nodded fervently. Sister Ruoyan has never disappointed us. Sister Ruoyan, your face. Lin Qingxue was both happy and worried. The wound on Yun Ruoyan's birthmark had been torn open even more severely during the battle. Some of the pus and blood that flowed out was smeared on her face, and some flowed down her cheek to her neck. There were still some loose strands of hair and dirt on it, and it was a terrible sight to behold. Yun Ruoyan touched it lightly with her hand. It was only a numbing sensation, not a painful one. Disgusting, isn't it? She frowned. A little, Lin Qingxue replied honestly. Yun Ruoyan's frown deepened. What girl didn't want to be beautiful? Even if she couldn't be beautiful, at least she couldn't be disgusting. Lin Qingchen glanced at Lin Qingxue. Don't worry, it'll be fine as long as I clean it up. She took out the tools she used to clean and bandage the wound from her pouch. Just clean up the pus and blood, don't bandage it, Yun Ruoyan replied. Grandfather's deduction is correct. Getting rid of the pus and blood will help me expel the poison from my body. Sister Ruoyan, would you be stronger than you are now if the poison in your body was completely removed? Lin Qingxue asked. Yun Ruoyan smiled faintly, not replying. Sister Ruoyan, do you know what you've done? Yun Ruoyao's voice rang out from behind them. What do you mean? Lin Qingxue turned around. Yun Ruoyu stepped forward, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Do you know who Yun Ruoyan just killed? Wang Kuang was the second son of the Wang family, the number one family in the Yu kingdom. Just wait for the Wang family's wrath. The second son of the Wang family. Yun Ruoyan suddenly recalled that, in her past life, the Peis had close ties with the Wangs of the Yu kingdom. At the time, Yun Ruoyan had just married into the Peis, and Pazio was still pretending to be interested in her. One day when the Peis held a banquet she had attended. The banquet was for Wang Meng, the eldest son of the Wang family. The purpose of the banquet was to congratulate him on entering Kongming Academy's pill-making academy. At the time she had been too timid and self-abased to raise her head, so she didn't know what he looked like. All she remembered was that he was wearing a navy blue robe. At the banquet, Pei Yingxiong had lavishly praised him, praising him for being able to enter the pill-making academy at such a young age and for his limitless future. Even more exaggerated was that Pei Yingxiong had gifted him his family heirloom, a first-grade pill-making furnace. 3 years later, this eldest son of the Wang family challenged Yun Ruoyan's grandfather, Lin Zainan. Lin Zainan had been severely injured in the duel, and not long after he passed away, leaving behind 2 sisters who had no one to rely on, and the centuries-old pill-making family had fallen into decline. By then she had already broken off all relations with the Lins, and the Peis and Lins were like fire and water. Despite her grief, she didn't have the opportunity to pay her respects to her grandfather, leaving her with a lifelong regret. Yun Ruoyao subconsciously stroked the silver bracelet on her wrist. The first-grade furnace was now within it, and only then did her tensed heart relax a little. It looks like I've made the right decision today, Yun Ruoyan muttered to herself. Not only will I have to bear the Wang family's wrath, but they should also be prepared to bear my wrath. What did you say? Yun Ruoyu frowned. Yun Ruoyan's mutterings were so soft that she didn't hear them clearly. Yun Ruoyan turned around and looked at the Yun sisters. I'm saying, roar. Just then the howl of a magical beast could be heard from the cliffs. Oh no, the magical beasts are coming to eat. Pei Zio's terrified voice rang out. The sky had already darkened, and these magical beasts were nocturnal creatures. They slept during the day and hunted at night. Roar. Roar. The howls of the magical beasts reverberated throughout the cliffs. Look, magical beast. Lu Xing pointed at the mouth of the cliff and shouted. As the crowd looked over, they saw 3 or 4 pairs of green lantern-sized eyes appear at the mouth of the cliff. These magical beasts were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye they had reached the cliffs. In the not-so-dark night, Yun Ruoyan could clearly see what these magical beasts looked like. They were all enormous, at least the size of 2 saber-toothed tigers. It's a high-rank magical beast, a demon-eyed lion. Qiu exclaimed. Just like the saber-toothed tiger, these beasts are large, but they move quickly and are adept at concealing their auras. A run. Someone shouted, and the crowd turned and ran into the valley. Save me! A woman screamed. Yun Ruoyan turned around to see a giant python slithering towards her from an unknown direction. It used its large tail to sweep the girl by Jin Fei's side into the air, then raised its head and opened its mouth, swallowing the girl whole. Yun Ruoyan turned back and ran as fast as she could toward the valley. After running all the way into the valley, they realized that the demonic beasts weren't chasing them. Only then did they stop to rest. It's all right now. Pei Zio panted. Don't worry, everyone. Those beasts must have been attracted by the corpses and they won't chase us. Is what you said true? What if he comes after us again? Lu Xing's slender body was bent like a bow as he asked while panting heavily. They won't. Pei Zio waved his hand. We're not even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Of course the corpses of the low-rank beasts will attract them more. Lu Xing sighed and sat down on the ground. Brother Wang's still in the valley. Jin Fei suddenly cried out. What do we do? Brother Wang's still in the valley. Lu Xing sat on the ground and buried his head between his knees, but he didn't say a word. Jin Fei pushed Lu Xing and yelled angrily, I told you to carry Brother Wang. How could you leave him behind? Lu Xing raised his head slightly. The situation was so dangerous just now, and a large python suddenly rushed down from the cliff. If I hadn't reacted quickly enough, I would have been eaten like my junior sister. So you abandoned Big Brother Wang. What else could I do? I didn't want to die. Lu Xing replied pitifully. If you don't want to die, then you'll have to wait for the head of the Wang family to exterminate your entire family. Jin Fei yelled viciously at Lu Xing, then pointed a finger at Yun Ruoyan. You'll be the first and then your companions. Lin Qingxue wanted to rush over to argue, but Lin Qingchen stopped her. You won't be able to escape either. Jin Fei pointed at Pei Zio. If not for you seducing Brother Wang, he wouldn't have brought us to this damned valley of beasts. Pei Zio's eyes narrowed. Wang Kuang told you that I brought you here? Yes. Jin Fei laughed. Scared now, aren't you? I know all your secrets and Brother Wang told me everything. You'd better go to the cliff and save Brother Wang, or I'll report this matter to the royal family of the Li Kingdom. Pfft. Before Jin Fei could finish speaking, a dagger was thrust into her chest. And the person who had thrust the dagger into her chest was none other than Pei Zio. Chapter 42. You dared to silence me. Jin Fei's eyes widened in disbelief. Pei Zio leaned close to her ear and whispered so that only the two of them could hear. Since I brought you here, I didn't intend to let you leave alive. Do you think the imperial family's secrets are so easily known? Pei Zhou pushed Jin Feier's body and pulled out the dagger. Jin Feier fell heavily to the ground, her beautiful eyes wide open. She had died with a grievance. Ah, you killed her, you killed Jin Feier. Lu Sheng was so shocked that it took him a moment to speak, but his voice came to a screeching halt. The rest of his words were forever stuck in his throat. Yun Ruiyao pulled the dagger out of Lu Sheng's body and sheathed it. This time it was Yun Ruoyan and the others' turn to be shocked. Lin Qingshue's jaw dropped. Before she could ask, Yun Ruoyan stepped forward and stood in front of her two sisters. What's the meaning of this? Ruoyan, don't be so agitated. Pei Zhou smiled amicably. He knew that he couldn't hide the truth from Yun Ruoyan, and the strength she had displayed in her battle with Wang Quang was truly frightening. Trying to deal with them in the same way he had dealt with Jin Feier and Lu Sheng wouldn't work, so it was better to be honest. It's like this. Pei Zhou began to explain the entire story to Yun Ruoyan and the others. The story began when they left the imperial territory. That day they saw Wang Quang and the others by the river. Because they were acquaintances, Pei Zhou brought Yun Ruoyao, Yi Qianying, and the others to camp with Wang Quang's party. After dinner, Pei Zhou and Yi Qianying took advantage of the fact that everyone else was asleep to find a secluded spot for a rendezvous. This time, Pei Zhou used the excuse that he couldn't sleep to chat with Yun Ruoyan. In order to raise her value in Pei Zhou's eyes, Yi Qianying told him that she could concoct a powder that could control magical beasts. At the time, Pei Zhou was having a headache over how to obtain the beast cores of high-rank beasts. After all, high-rank beasts were all exceptionally ferocious, and he was no match for them with his current strength. His original plan was to ditch Yi Qianying and the rest on the second day and head for the Valley of Beasts alone. He would think of a way once he reached the place. But after hearing Yi Qianying's words, he immediately thought of asking her to concoct a powder that could knock out magical beasts. Wouldn't it be easier for him to retrieve the inner core then? Therefore he did not hide anything and directly told Yi Qianying the secret of the 10,000 Beasts Valley. The two of them hit it off immediately. The two of them were happily hugging each other, but who knew that someone would suddenly appear out of nowhere? Wang Quang had just been relieving himself in this secluded corner when Pei Zhou and Yi Qianying suddenly ran over. In a moment of desperation he grabbed 2 handfuls of soil and buried his filth. Then without even putting on his pants he found a bush to hide in. Originally he thought that he was just enjoying a beautiful spring scenery. He didn't expect to learn such a big secret. How could he let go of the opportunity to get a share of it? Therefore he immediately jumped out, almost scaring the two of them who were burning with passion. The two of them had no choice but to agree to bring Wang Quang and the rest to the Valley of Beasts. Actually, they had long since planned to silence them. Pei Zhou skipped over the part about his affair with Yi Qianying and told them the main points of the matter. You can't blame us for being ruthless. Pei Zhou puffed out his chest and said righteously, this Wang Quang isn't someone who keeps his word. This Wang Quang isn't a man of his word. Now that he knows this secret, the entire Yu Kingdom knows about it. The 10,000 Beast Valley is the royal treasure of the Li Kingdom. How could we let other countries know about it? Now that we know this secret, you won't kill us to silence us, will you? Lin Qingshan suddenly asked. That's right, this isn't the first time you've harmed us. Who knows, you might even be harboring some evil ideas. Lin Qingxue added. We won't harm you, Yi Qianying said sincerely. I promise. What do you have to promise? The usually calm Lin Qingshan suddenly turned sharp. Are you going to use your beast-attracting powder? Yi Qianying's heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? I don't understand. You don't understand? Then I'll explain it to you. Lin Qingshan stared intently at Yi Qianying. Why did the saber-toothed tiger only attack Sister Ruoyan and not the two of you? And why did the snakes only attack Qingshuer in the snake nest? It's all because you sprinkled some beast-attracting powder on them. You're slandering me. Yi Qianying had done all of this in secret, even hiding it from the Yun sisters. She had thought that no one would notice, but Lin Qingshan, who had been studying all sorts of medicinal herbs for a long time, had already sensed something amiss. She hadn't been able to guess who would have the ability to do so, but she hadn't expected them to expose themselves. So that's how it is. I was wondering why those snakes kept attacking me. They were drugged. Lin Qingshue's eyes widened in realization. How dare you use such a despicable method to harm me and Sister Ruoyan? When I get out of here, I'll definitely have grandfather pay a visit to your family. Lin Qingxue directly brought up Lin Zainan's name, causing Yi Qianying to panic. If Lin Zainan were to pay a visit, her uncle would surely be furious, and he might even kick her out of the Yun household. Not only that, but if word got out that she had used such despicable methods to harm others, she wouldn't be able to stay in the capital any longer. As she thought of this, Yi Qianying's grip on Pei Zio's arm tightened. Pei Zio looked at Yi Qianying with a complicated expression. Since we don't trust each other, why don't we make a gentleman's agreement? What agreement? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. Seeing that Yun Ruoyao had relented, Pei Zio felt that there was hope. We won't tell anyone that you killed Wang Kuang, and you won't tell anyone that we killed Jin Fei. Wouldn't it be a win-win situation for both of us? Yun Ruoyan leaned against a tree trunk, the miniature Pei family spear in her hand. She tapped the tree trunk with it, seemingly considering Pei Zio's proposal. Everyone's heart also rose and fell along with the rhythm of her beating. Sister Ruoyan, we can't trust them. Lin Qingxue was the first to object. Lin Qingchen didn't say anything. Although she didn't trust Pei Zio and the others, in order to protect Yun Ruoyan, mutual secrecy was the only solution. Zhui Feng, who had been standing behind Yun Ruoyan, whispered, "This Pei Zio is very cunning. I'm afraid that he'll push all the blame onto us." Yun Ruoyan continued tapping the tree trunk. After a long while, just as everyone was about to lose their patience, Yun Ruoyan finally stood up and looked at Pei Zio with a half-smile. "I have a better idea, one that can solve all of our problems. Do you want to hear it?" "Oh? What idea?" Pei Zio couldn't help but take a step forward, and Yi Qianying's grip on his arm tightened. Yun Ruoyan looked at Pei Zio with a smile. The pus and blood on her face had already been cleaned by Lin Qingchen, and a tuft of her hair had been let down to cover the scar. From Pei Zio's perspective, she had a beauty that he had never seen before. "Come here. I'll tell you what to do." Yun Ruoyan pointed at Pei Zio with the tip of her spear. Pei Zio pried Yi Qianying's hand away and walked toward Yun Ruoyan. 1 step, 2 steps. As he got closer and closer, the smile in Yun Ruoyan's eyes slowly disappeared, replaced by a thick killing intent. "My idea is to kill all of you." Yun Ruoyan suddenly shouted coldly, and the spear in her hand suddenly extended toward Pei Zio, thrusting straight toward his chest. In Yun Ruoyan's heart, Yi Qianying and Pei Zio were the source of all her pain in her past life. Ever since her rebirth, she had always wanted to kill them, but she had never had the opportunity to do so. And now was the perfect opportunity. The spear pierced into Pei Zio's chest and fresh blood gushed out. Brother Zio!" Yi Qianying cried out. "Yun Ruoyan, what are you doing?" Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu also couldn't believe that Yun Ruoyan would be so bold. Even though they had wanted to harm Yun Ruoyan, they were afraid that others would find out, so they had always plotted against her in secret. But Yun Ruoyan had actually killed him in front of everyone. Had she gone mad? "You really want to kill me?" Pei Zio gripped the blood-stained spear as he looked at Yun Ruoyan. He really couldn't understand why Yun Ruoyan, who had always had a good impression of him, would suddenly hate him and even try to kill him. "Because I hate you." Yun Ruoyan gritted her teeth. "Die." Yun Ruoyan suddenly exerted all her strength, but strangely, the spear seemed to meet with some kind of resistance, unable to advance any further. What was going on? Why wasn't the spear listening to her? Haha. Pei Zio smiled sinisterly. "I told you that this is a treasure of the Pei family, and that the blood of the Pei family can summon it." He opened and closed his mouth, and the spear instantly shrank, leaving Yun Ruoyan's grasp and returning to Pei Zio's hand. "Brother Zio, are you all right?" Yi Qianying hurriedly ran over to check on Pei Zio's wound, then cast a venomous glare at Yun Ruoyan. "You're such an evil woman." Yun Ruoyan hadn't expected Pei Zio to have such a trick up his sleeve. Her attack had failed and her killing intent only grew. "Humph." She snorted coldly. "I'm not 1,000 times as evil as you. Today either you die or I die." As she spoke, the 3 people behind her unhesitatingly drew their weapons and stood by Yun Ruoyan's side. In that case, there's really nothing more to say. The spear in Pei Zio's hand grew larger once more. Yi Qianying placed a blood-clotting pill in his mouth, and the bleeding immediately stopped. Today either you die or we die. Yun Ruiyao and Yun Ruoyu also drew their weapons, and the two sides immediately faced off against each other. A battle was about to begin. Chapter 43. If not for Yun Ruoyan's secret weapon, both sides were roughly equal in strength, and if they were to clash head-on, both sides would probably suffer heavy losses. But since she was going to kill them all, there seemed to be no point in hiding anything. Yun Ruoyan had already made her decision. If necessary, she would summon the Feilai blade and end the battle quickly. Yun Ruoyan unsheathed the sword at her waist and stabbed at Pei Zio. Pei Zio pushed Yi Qianying aside and blocked the attack with his spear. With a clang, the sword and spear collided, and Pei Zio was forced back a few steps by the force of the collision. Although Yun Ruoyan didn't retreat, the sword in her hand began to crack. Yun Ruoyan immediately activated the bracelet's amplification ability, but because she had expended it in her battle with Wang Kuang, she could only muster third-rank spiritual energy. After the amplification, her combat ability was equivalent to that of a 6th-rank blade master, and she was still slightly stronger than Pei Zio, who was only at the peak of 5th rank. However, Pei Zio was wielding a 1st-rank spiritual weapon, a spear, while Yun Ruoyan was only wielding an ordinary iron sword from the Yun family. As a result, she didn't have much of an advantage. Although he had been prepared, Pei Zio was still astonished that Yun Ruoyan had been able to force him back with just an ordinary sword. A conjecture that had been bothering him for a long time surfaced. Yun Ruoyan definitely wasn't just a 4th-rank blade master. She had been hiding her true strength all this time. Take this. Pei Zio suddenly threw the spear in his hand at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan leaped up and spun in midair, and the spear brushed past her hair as it shot forward. When Yun Ruoyan's body fell from midair, she tapped the ground with one foot and leapt up again. At the same time, she raised the sword in her hand in front of her. The spear made a sharp turn in midair, thrusting toward Yun Ruoyan once more, but it just so happened to collide with the sword in front of her. Clang! The spear was deflected, but the sword in Yun Ruoyan's hand broke in two. Xianxia, lend me your daggers, Yun Ruoyan called out to Lin Xianxia, who was still in a daze. Lin Xianxia reacted and threw the daggers back at Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan caught the daggers. The spear that had been deflected had returned to her, and she struck out with both daggers. Clang clang clang. Clang clang clang. After striking it 6 times in a row, the cloud-smashing spear's attack was finally stopped, and the spear was forced back. Although Lin Xianxia's twin blades weren't spiritual weapons, they had been forged from the finest vajra and were extremely sturdy. With Pei Zio's current level of cultivation, he wouldn't be able to break them with his spear. The cloud-shattering spear circled around Pei Zio once before returning to his hand. You actually caught the 9 revolutions godly return spear. Pei Zio's face was pale and a thin layer of sweat had formed on his forehead. Using the incantation to control the cloud-shattering spear had consumed a large amount of his spiritual energy. 9 revolutions godly reversion spear. Yun Ruoyan held the twin sabers in her hands as she glanced sideways at Pei Zio. She smiled faintly. You're still not mature enough. In her past life, although her cultivation had been restricted, her understanding of martial arts wasn't lacking at all. Whenever Pei Zio practiced the spear techniques that Pei Yingxiong had taught him, she would always be able to see through his shortcomings. Once, when father and son were sparring in the garden, they had used the 9 revolutions godly return spear technique. At the time, she had gone to deliver tea to Yun Ruoyan, and with just a few glances she had memorized the spear's trajectory in midair. Unfortunately, the 9 revolutions godly return spear technique required a corresponding incantation, or she wouldn't have been any weaker than Pei Yingxiong's. Now it's my turn to attack. Yun Ruoyan pointed the tip of her dagger at Pei Zio, her gaze even colder than the blade of her dagger. What are you all waiting for? Let's attack together. Yi Qianying exclaimed anxiously. Yun Ruoyan's going to kill us all. If Brother Zio dies, none of us will be able to escape. Yun Ruoyan's murderous intent was so obvious that every single one of them felt a sense of fear. Yun Ruoyan, since you don't care about your sisterhood, we won't go easy on you either. Yun Ruoyao shouted, then exchanged a glance with Yun Ruoyu. Both of them raised their swords and charged at Yun Ruoyan. Lin Qingchen and Zhu Yifeng also joined the fray. Brother Zhou, be careful. Sister Xianxia, attack her lower body. Without a weapon, Lin Qingxue and Zhuo Lin'er could only watch from the back, anxious. Zhuo Yifeng had already used up all of his arrows in the previous battle, so he could only use his bow as a weapon to fight against Yun Ruiyao. Their cultivations were about the same, but Yun Ruoyan's weapon was more convenient to use, and the two of them were evenly matched. Lin Qingxia wasn't at a disadvantage against both Yun Ruoyu and Yi Qianying either. Pei Zio, on the other hand, was forced back by Yun Ruoyan's attacks. His arms and legs were all injured by Yun Ruoyan's daggers, and it looked like he could die at any moment. Sister Ruoyan, cut him up, cut him up. Let's see if he dares to lead us into a den of snakes again. Lin Qingxue shouted fiercely. The den was the most disgusting and terrifying place she had ever seen in her life, so she hated Pei Zio as much as she hated the den. Zhuo Lin'er's face turned serious. There's a beast's aura, she said as she tugged on Lin Qingxue's clothes. What did you say? Lin Qingxue's eyes were focused on the battle in front of her, and she didn't hear what Zhuo Lin'er was saying. By the time she finally heard what Zhuo Lin'er was saying, a gigantic beast's roar could be heard from the valley. The roars were filled with berserk energy, and they shook the entire valley with each roar. What's going on? The few people in the melee were shocked by the roar and stopped fighting. They looked in the direction of the cliff. Qianying, shouldn't the beast have been drugged by you by now? Yun Ruoyao frowned at Yi Qianying. Everyone's gaze turned to Yi Qianying. Yi Qianying's expression was a little flustered. When she had followed the group into the valley, she had drugged the corpses of the beasts with a powder that would cause them to fall asleep after eating. If they'd eaten the corpses, they should have fallen asleep. Why would they be roaring so violently? For a moment, Yi Qianying didn't know what to make of it. Perhaps these beasts are too strong, and the powder I concocted isn't strong enough to keep them down. This was the only plausible explanation. As soon as Yi Qianying finished speaking, the ground began to tremble and 4 devil-eyed lions rushed out of the cliff. Although it was night, their lantern-like eyes were still able to spot the group in the forest. Beasts were all intelligent creatures, and the higher their rank, the higher their intelligence. They hadn't paid much attention to the group before, but when they were eating, they suddenly realized that something was wrong with the food they were eating. Why was it that the more they ate, the more dizzy they became? Very quickly they guessed that it was the group's doing, and angrily they chased after them. Mistress, don't just stand there. Run. Qiu reminded her. Yun Ruoyan glanced at Pei Zio and Yi Qianying and gritted her teeth. Count yourself lucky, she thought. I'll settle this score with you later. Zhu Yifeng, carry your sister. Everyone run. Yun Ruoyan called out to the Lin sisters before running off in a certain direction. Pei Zio, Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu also wanted to run, but Yi Qianying told them to wait. The few of them looked at her in confusion. She took out a small black porcelain bottle from her bosom and removed the lid of the bottle. A faint mist floated out. Yi Qianying blew lightly in the direction that Yun Ruoyan and the others were running in, and the mist dissipated. The beasts will chase after this mist, so we'll be fine as long as we run in the other direction. Yi Qianying pulled Pei Zio's hand and ran in the opposite direction. Yun Ruoyao and Yun Ruoyu followed behind them. Hey, why didn't you take out such a good thing earlier? Yun Ruoyu asked from behind them. After all, they had encountered a few beast hordes before, and Yi Qianying had always relied on the protection of others to escape unscathed. This beast-attracting mist is extremely difficult to concoct, and it can only be used in a life-or-death situation, Yi Qianying replied. I think you'll only use it when you're in a life-or-death situation, Yun Ruoyu said sourly, wrinkling her nose. Ruoyu, don't talk so much. Yun Ruoyao glanced at Yun Ruoyu, then at the backs of the 2 girls in front of them. She hadn't expected this cousin of hers to have some tricks up her sleeve, and it looked like she'd have to befriend her in the future. In another direction, the beasts were following the beast-attracting mist in the direction that Yun Ruoyan and the others had escaped in. Damn it, why are they only chasing us again? Lin Qingxue cursed as she ran. Actually, everyone knew that it had to be Yi Qianying's doing. In her past life, after Yun Ruoyan married into the Pei family, she had cut off all contact with Yi Qianying, and it was only on the night of her death that they met again. As a result, she had no idea that Yi Qianying had such a devious ability. Yi Qianying, Pei Zio, you must die. Ah, they're almost here. Lin Qingxue turned around to see the 4 beast-eyed lions bearing down on them like 4 small mountains. Scared out of her wits, she ran in front of the rest of the group as if there was a gust of wind beneath her feet. In the end, the 4 beast-eyed lions had been drugged, and they smashed through countless small trees in their dizziness, sending sand and pebbles flying into the air. However, they continued to chase Yun Ruoyan's group even more ferociously. It was as if they wouldn't be appeased if they didn't tear them to shreds. Sister Ruan, Sister Qingchen, there's a vine over there. Lin Qingxue pointed at a cliff in front of her, then dashed over like the wind, climbing up the vines without hesitation. Her speed was unprecedentedly fast. Yun Ruoyan's group also began climbing up the vines. This cliff was even steeper than the one at the valley's exit, but fortunately, there were many vines growing along the side of the cliff. These vines were all very thick and strong, and they hung down the cliff. Their tiny roots dug into the cracks in the rocks, continuing to grow until they covered the entire surface of the cliff. Yun Ruoyan looked up with the help of the bright moonlight. The cliff was so tall that it seemed to have pierced through the pitch-black sky, and she couldn't see the top. Boom boom boom. The entire cliff trembled. When the 4 beast-eyed lions saw Yun Ruoyan's group climb up the cliff, they slammed their heads against the cliff, hoping to knock them down. The group paused for a moment, then continued climbing. There was a cave about 20 meters above them, and they would be absolutely safe once they climbed in. However, they didn't know how big the cave was, or whether it would be big enough to accommodate all 5 of them. Zhou Yifeng was the first to climb into the cave. Although it was relatively narrow, it was deep enough to accommodate all of them. After settling Zhou Lin'er down, he lay at the mouth of the cave and extended a hand to Yun Ruoyan. "Give me your hand." Yun Ruoyan, who had almost reached the mouth of the cave, placed her hand in Zhou Yifeng's, and he pulled her up with a light tug. Then the 2 of them went to pull Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen. Once everyone was inside the cave, Yun Ruoyan finally let out a sigh of relief. By this time, the tremors of the cliff had lessened significantly. "Sister Ruoyan, Sister Qingchen, look." Lin Qingxue looked down from the mouth of the cave. Those beasts seemed to have run out of energy. The mouth of the cave wasn't very wide, and it would be a little cramped for the 3 of them. Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen carefully moved closer to the mouth of the cave and looked down. As expected, the 4 beast-eyed lions were slamming against the cliff wall with less and less force, and before long they collapsed to the ground one by one. It's not that they've run out of energy, but that Yi Qianying's incantation is taking effect. Lin Qingchen couldn't help but sigh. "I didn't expect Yi Qianying to be so strong." "Sister Ruan, Sister Qingchen, that's wonderful." Lin Qingxue jumped up from the mouth of the cave. "Let's go down quickly. Those are 4 high-rank beasts. We're going to be rich." "Qingxue, be careful." Yun Ruoyan hurriedly pulled Lin Qingxue back and looked at her reproachfully. This sister of hers was a little too cheerful at times. Lin Qingxue stuck out her tongue, not minding Yun Ruoyan's rebuke. She continued to look down. "Let's go down now," she exclaimed impatiently. "Let's wait a little longer," Zhou Yifeng replied. "The beasts are very cunning. Perhaps they're trying to trick us." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.